Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's meeting of the Committee of Adjustments. If everyone can take their seats. This is a meeting to consider applications for minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act of Ontario. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the proposal that is before us, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the committee, after consultation with the Secretary-Treasurer, will set a new hearing date. No further notice will be provided unless there are changes to the application. In order to conduct an effective and efficient hearing, we have adopted the following processes. The owner or authorized agent will be given the opportunity, if so desired, to briefly explain to us the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise out of the hearing. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for this presentation. You need to state your full name and address for the record. Any materials submitted to the committee for viewing will remain the property of this committee. Any submissions beyond 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All persons attending the hearing who wish to support or oppose the application must also state their full name and address for the record. A 5-minute presentation will be provided to make their case. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chairperson of the committee. Any submissions beyond those 5 minutes will also be at the discretion of the committee. If there are several speakers sharing the same view, please select a spokesperson to represent the group and its opinion. We want to hear everyone's views, however, concerning or covering the same points will not advance your case. The owner or agent will then be provided another 5 minutes to respond to comments made by any interested parties and answer any questions from the committee members. If the owner or agent has any concerns found in staff reports, particularly with any proposed conditions, this will be the time and opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken into committee for a decision, and this will mark the end of the discussion. Once the committee makes an oral decision, any person desiring a copy must file with the Secretary-Treasurer at this meeting a written request for notice of the decision. A green sheet is provided for this purpose at the end of the room. Please note that you must make a written request in order to be included on this list that is used by the Ontario Municipal Board for the giving of any subsequent notice of any appeal. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed no later than 10 days for minor variance and 15 days for consent to the applicant, the owner, and the agent, and any other person who filed a written request for such notice. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, you may appeal this to the Ontario Municipal Board. The last day to appeal the decision to the Ontario Municipal Board will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding. The Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant through written correspondence. Please, all members of the public attending this committee meeting are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and any other people in attendance tonight. Tonight's meeting will be live streamed and available for future viewing on the town's live stream page at oakville.ca/live. We ask you at this time that cellular phones and pagers be switched off during this meeting, as they do tend to interfere with the audio system, or at least have them on silent. Thank you. So we have one regret this evening, Mr. Paul Cronus. And do we have any declaration of pecuniary interests? I see none. Today's earliest deferral date will be November the 29th of 2016. Are there any requests for deferral or withdrawal of applications at this time? I see none. Thank you. We have no consents this evening, so we will proceed with our first application on our roster this evening, and that will be CAV A123 of 2016 at 1098 Melvin Avenue. Will the agent or representative please come forward?
My name is Mark Crowley, Crowley. I'm the owner and the applicant for the application.
Thank you, Mr. Merck. Are there any members in the audience who are here present for CAV 123 of 2016 at 1098 Melvin Avenue? I see none. Oh, okay. Thank you for, so I'm going to ask again because you were a little late. So are you all here for 109 Melvin Avenue, 123? Okay. Are you in opposition or in support? In opposition. So the group of you will be represented by one speaker, or will you all be speaking? You'll be represented by one speaker. Thank you. We'll have a presentation from the applicant, and then we will proceed to hearing your concerns. Go ahead, sir.
So I'm the applicant at 1098 Melvin Avenue. I'm here to request the committee grant a few minor variances on a proposed two-story craftsman-style house to be built on the lot in late fall or early spring of next year. The minor variances include issues of height.
I'm going to interrupt you just for 1 second. Please bear with me. We've, just for the benefit of everyone attending tonight, we have received some last-minute changes to almost every application that is going to be before us today. So what we were going to do is, before the applicant presents their case, I'll explain to you what those changes are so that you're aware of them, because that might affect your opposition or concerns. So I will have the Secretary Treasurer read the changes as you've submitted them, if that's okay with you.
There's
And
changes?
then
I didn't know there was changes. Oh.
Actually, it was the updated zoning bylaw. As you know, the new bylaw, the new bylaw was appealed by OMB.
Yes.
Subsection was adopted, and as a result, some variances are not required anymore.
Are not what?
Are not required anymore. For your case, this variance number 6, number 7, number 8, and number 9 are not required anymore.
Oh, so I can knock some off that list.
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay.
So we are now dealing with only variance 1 through 5. Members of concern for this application, if you do have that before you, you just have to be concerned with the variances 1 through 5. So I'll allow you to proceed with your application presentation, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you.
I think I can put the design up here, right?
They're working on it in the back.
They're
Just
working
give them a
on it,
minute.
okay.
There it goes.
So I'm asking for, I guess, 1 to 5 variances. A small variance with regard to height for about 2 to 4 inches, mostly because of the structure of the lot, which has an upward slope. The house itself is actually only 8.35 meters, and the max is 9 meters. But because of that slope, as well as some, you can see that there are some skylights at the top, it increases the height by about 4 inches, I think. So I'm asking for a variance for that, as well as a lot coverage variance, a small one to, I have a play structure at the back of the property, which is included in the lot coverage, as well as the front and back porch covers are covered, and they're included in lot coverage as well. So a minor variance for that. Also a minor variance for the floor area coverage and the front yard setback. I'm trying to align the house with the lineup with the 2 other properties on either side of me. So my house is right now is a little further back. I want to bring it a little forward by 2 feet 7 inches to adhere to that line, and also pull the backyard, the back of the house a little forward, so I'm a little further away from my big oak trees. And with regard to that play structure at the back, I built it about 18 years ago without the benefit of a site survey. So as a result, I put it about, instead of 2 feet away from the fences, it's about half a foot away from the fence. So I'm just asking, it's been there for 18 years, to make this a legal placement. So that's it. I've also canvassed everybody in the area, and they don't seem to have any issues on it, except for the people that I have here tonight. And I've also reviewed the plans with them, every single person that I could get hold of, and I know most of my neighbors. So, and the town planning department has reviewed, I've been working with them, the submission, and I found that it satisfies all four tests of the Planning Act. So that's it, I'll
Okay.
leave it up.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley.
Okay.
I'll now invite your neighbors to speak, and then I'll give you an opportunity to rebut. Who is going to represent the group?
Good evening, everyone.
Good
Is that
evening.
okay? Not too loud? Okay, my name is Suzanne Seelig-Mentz, and I'm at 1106 Melvin Avenue. I'm to the right of the proposed building. So first of all, before I start, I'd like to read a small letter from our neighbors. Okay, dear committee, we, the residents of Ward 3, who reside on the street of Melvin Avenue, wish to inform the council that we are opposed to the variance requested by Mark Crowley. We collectively wish the zoning bylaws are not to be amended as per his request to build the home he wishes to build. We request that he modify his plans for a more reasonable size within the current code of RL2 zoning bylaws. Thank you. Sincerely, the residents and the residents of Melvin Avenue. I have 14 signatures on this list, and in fact, I spoke to many of the neighbors that most of them did not, in fact, look at the plans. They just signed blindly on the plans. So there's about 14 signatures here.
So
I have that.
as we stated earlier, any evidence that you have to remit to the Secretary Treasurer, so you'll do that after you
Okay.
finish your presentation.
Okay, so now also, my particular home, even though the street is under tremendous regentrification and is helping, obviously, the values of the entire street, this particular, changes to the variance is going to greatly affect the financial equity of my home, and will have a negative financial impact, plus the aesthetic situation on the house. First of all, the proposed height of the home and the proximity of the project will basically cut out a lot of the sunlight from my home, which is not good, obviously. Also, in terms of bringing the house so much forward is going to affect the safety, because in terms of myself trying to get out of the driveway, it's quite a bit closer, and it's going to block the visibility for me to get out of my driveway. So I'm very concerned about that. And what else do I have here? With the structure on the left of my house, let me think for a second here. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. A couple of years ago, there was a variance to the house behind me, and they built a large garage. So now with the garage in the back and with this huge, massive structure on the other side, it's like two icebergs colliding, and very claustrophobic, and again, is not going to be good for the aesthetic value and financial value and equity of my home. And finally, the tree house that Mr. Crowley spoke about, it is in fact on the line. So I disagree with that assessment. And I know, Bill, did you want to say something? My other neighbor on the other side had a few comments as well.
Okay, I was very clear. We have 5 minutes. You were supposed to represent the group. If you're not, then that person needs to step up right now, because you only
Okay.
have 2 more minutes remaining.
Are you okay with that, Bill? Okay, thank you.
So are those all the points that have covered all the neighbors that are behind you?
Yes, those are the points.
Okay, so everyone in the back is satisfied?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Just before you run away, are there any questions of Ms., am I pronouncing it correctly, Seelig-Mentz? Sorry,
And that's okay. Seelig-Mentz.
Seelig-Mentz, sorry.
Yeah.
Are there any questions?
So I just want to clarify,
Yes,
each one of these 5 variances, you're opposed to,
correct.
okay?
All 5 of them. I'm not opposed to building the house. That, I don't have a problem with that.
Right.
And we've never had any problems on the street. All the neighbors get along really, really well. May I just read one of the neighbors' assessment, someone that signed today? They had just bought a house on Melvin Avenue. And when I came and spoke to her, she said, I have the same experience recently with the new build, and the code was broken, and there's not an 8-foot property line. My new beautiful home I had just purchased has been ruined by builders in 2015 and 16. The laws need to be upheld for the satisfaction of all residents and not one, particular person. That's how to keep a community happy. So this is a new neighbor in our neighborhood.
Are there any further questions? I see none. Thank you. Mr. Crowley? So you've heard the concerns and the comments by the,
Yeah, it's the first I've heard of them, but
well,
I
you've
can
got
address
5
them
minutes
now if
to
you like.
answer all those concerns.
I can only say that all of the neighbors I spoke to with regard to, I went through this whole application with them, and we reviewed it together. On this application, I have the site survey, I've got the layout of each floor plan, and I've got renderings of the front, the back, the sides, and even the house at the back.
Well, perhaps for the
So-
benefit of the neighbors, because Mrs. Seligmanse said that a lot of people did not see these plans online, perhaps you could show them
I
the
think
plans.
they've
No,
got
just
this.
put them on the,
Sure.
and then speak to them. I urge you to speak to them, because then that will give them an understanding. I mean, speak to the plans on the monitor. Like, direct your comments concerning their
So my
issues
comment-
by
sorry.
looking at the plans and showing them what you want to say, because then they will have a better idea of what your response is, and
I
they can.
understand.
you
So
know.
my point was that for neighbors to be signing their name and giving me support blindly, this is what they mean by blindly, is going through all of this documentation, because every single one of them did. So they were well informed as to what the build was all about. So that being said, let me just address some of the issues with regard to side yard setbacks, shades, property value,
Please,
the little house at the back. This is the site survey, and maybe I'll put it this way. So this is the street here, and these are the 2 city trees that are out front. Can you guys see that?
can we
It's not
focus
even-
out? The focus is off.
It's not very clear.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. So there you go. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. There's the 2 trees at the front. That's the neighbor's house on either side. This is Suzanne's house and Bill's house. You can see Bill's house is probably the minimum setback to the property line, and the same with Suzanne. She's got a driveway here. So there are fences here and here, and the current structure is here. And what I'm proposing for the new structure on this side is probably 4 times the minimum setback from the walls that is required under code, under the bylaws. So it's a huge area that I was going to build a garden here. So if there are shade issues on this side, it's not from my property, that's for sure. But I understand Bill's got a kitchen window here, and fair enough, but I think whoever builds on Bill's house, they're all coming down in the next 10 years, I would suggest, is probably going to put a fence there anyway. The same thing with Suzanne's area here. On this side, the setback is way beyond what's the minimum required by the code, the bylaws. And I've done that on purpose because I simply didn't need, the lot is 80 foot wide, and I simply didn't need it, and I didn't, that full width. And so I purposely gave the neighbors on either side very generous areas to get sunlight through.
And the variances before us do not include any side yard variances. The only variance that affects
I
your
did make
setbacks are your
variances.
front yard, so that
Yes.
speaks to,
And if you can
that
see the
point.
front yard setback, the bylaws require or allow another meter in front of these. Oh, it's not up again. Where's our tech guy? The bylaws allow another meter to be built in front of the house. So I had the surveyor put a meter on the front of either house, and this is the line we're supposed to be adhering to. So all I'm asking for is for the house to come up to that line, to be consistent with the property lines here. And what that does is allow the house to come another 2 foot forward so I can protect my big oak trees here. And this whole house was designed to stay away from these oak trees as far as I could, because the root system is quite large.
You've got 30 seconds, Mr. Crowley.
The other issue is the structure at the side here. It is not on the property line. It's about 6 inches back. The surveyor has outlined that specifically. Suzanne's noted issue with regard to the house at the back. You can see the difference here, and I agree with one of the houses is huge. And that's one of the reasons that I want this house to stay, because it gives me some privacy. This house is a 3-car garage with a full apartment upstairs that was allowed to come back and be built in this person's backyard, which is quite big, but it really affects all our view. And they took down quite a few trees. So it's a concern to all of us, but this house has been here for 18 years, and you can see that the trees have now grown up around it. I guess I could move it, but not without taking down those trees. And I think, to move it another foot is it's quite silly.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crowley. Gentlemen, do you have any questions of Mr. Crowley before we take this matter into committee?
Just one quick question. I noticed a for sale sign on your house, but you keep talking about building this thing for you.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
that the-
you can sell a house even for a build, before, during, and even after the build, after the construction. And I'm testing the waters, as actually my neighbors are here as well. They have for sale signs up as well.
No, I was just
So,
wondering, just because the
so
terminology
it's
you're using.
it's a common practice.
It's not a problem. It's not a
Okay.
consideration, really.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of Mr. Crowley? Thank you, Mr. Crowley. We'll now take this matter into committee.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, who would like to move a motion? I will just reflect that the town is supporting this application, and they do have a condition, should you decide that you will also put forward a motion to accept this application, that the proposed well be constructed in general accordance with the plans as submitted. Is there a discussion on this application? Mr. Zlowski, are you ready to move a motion?
Sure, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm going to support staff on this application and move that the application be approved. I guess I'm going to say as amended with the changes in the zoning bylaw. I do believe this house is consistent with a significant amount of new construction in this neighborhood. And although we've heard some issues from the neighbors, I personally didn't hear a lot of issues that dealt specifically to the variances as to the actual impact, other than financial, that they thought would occur. I also note that the house hasn't been built to its maximum side yard setbacks, providing greater separation to the neighbors. We did hear about concern for height, but we're talking 0.1 meter in the center of one portion of the roof that the variance is for. I fail to see the impact of that, nor do I see an impact of a play structure being a little closer to the very rear of the property. I also heard issue of safety because the house is being brought forward. In my view, the house is being brought up to provide a consistent streetscape with the houses on either side, and it also still appears to be almost 50 feet from the travel portion of the road, so I don't see how that front yard setback would have an impact on being able to safely get in and out of the neighbor's property. So, Madam Chair, I would again move the application be approved as amended with the removal of conditions or variances 6 through 9, make it subject to 2 conditions, that a permit be issued within 2 years and that development proceed in general accordance with the plans provided.
Thank you, Mr. Chalosky. So the motion before us is to approve this application with the set conditions. Is there a discussion on this application? I see none. All those in support? Mr. Crowley, your application has been approved. Moving on to the next application, CAV 168 at 1116 Westdale Road.
Good evening, Madam
Good
Chair.
evening.
Bill Hicks with Hicks Design Studios. On behalf of my client at 1116 Westdale Road, I'll be very brief with my presentation. This is hopefully the last of these straggling ones that have gone through site plan. Actually, the house is mostly constructed, and the bylaw for the projections of balconies was amended somewhat, so we are asking for it to be approved in accordance with the site plan that's already been approved. And really, the variance is only for that one small item that's here because it projects more than 1.5 meters beyond the rear of the, or the main projection of the house. So it is totally consistent with what's on the site plan. And as I say, we haven't built it at this point. We're waiting for the decision of this committee. So.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Is there anyone in the audience that is present for CAV 168 at 1116 Westdale Road? Okay. Are you in opposition or? Okay. Would you like to address the committee? Mr. Hicks, I will take a few minutes to take those members' comments. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Thomas Solomon, 140 Wilder Drive.
Wilder Drive.
Is this better?
Yes,
Okay.
please. Thank you.
So we've come many times for this particular property. So I'd like to see the justification for getting a variance. From what I've seen online, the documentation, it is going from 1 to 3 times what the bylaw says. There's just so many variances that were asked for this particular property. Really, this property and similar to the one next to it, it's really not in keeping with the neighborhood. The houses are really massive. There was also, during the construction, we received communication through our counselor from city staff as to an open question around the height of this home and whether it's within the bylaws. We heard of a stop order issued, but we never heard any conclusions on that. So I do want to bring my concerns here, which are shared by other neighbors, and this is an opportunity to bring it to the committee, as they continue to ask for variances while they've clearly, at least from what we know, have violated some bylaws. So I do bring eventually the back of that property is going to be public space. This is going to encroach. And in fact, last time I was here, it was for the property in between. It's one between this property and the one further west. It's 1200, and the architect there at that time was presenting their own variances, but at the same time, they actually complained about the size of the balconies of those neighboring properties. I mean, just granting this, yes, there's going to be a screen, but what will the neighbors that haven't built yet do with that? How are they going to modify, or what variances they'll ask for to compensate for that? I guess we'll wait and see, but the bylaws are here for a reason, to anticipate and circumvent some of these potential conflicts. So I would like to see proper justification why this variance is being asked for. Why is it necessary? And with that, the overall result of these massive homes that are really not in keeping. If you look at along the road on the lake, they don't look anything like that. They're much higher, much bigger, much massive, and boxy. Also along Westdale, away from the lake, yes, the homes are modern. They're very nice, but they're nowhere as massive or boxy. So adding more is just going to proliferate this. The next home is just going to be wanting to be further, closer, bigger, whatever, right? Everybody just wants to make it bigger. So really that is my presentation. Are there any questions?
Solomon.
I was going to bug our planner maybe to just give us, for the benefit of the public here, what was the timing of this new bylaw with respect to the balcony, and how, because it's fairly recent.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, to the committee. This is a situation where at the time, the bylaw in place at the time that the application was subject to the site plan, the bylaw prescribed that a balcony is permitted, and it was permitted to project into a rear yard by 1.5 meters. So the design that you see was allowed and complied with the bylaw at the time that it went to the site plan committee for approval. At the time that the applicant proceeded for a building permit, the bylaw had changed the way that the definition of balconies are provided, in that it's allowed to project 1.5 meters from the face of the wall, causing the larger bump out area that you see on the plans to be in a state of non-compliance. In that, the applicants proceeded with their building permit without the balcony in play, in the hopes that proceeding today, this evening in front of you, they would be able to obtain approval consistent with the site plan approval they originally received, which had complied with the bylaw at that time.
Okay. So what I'm getting here is a technicality on timing, but that aside, can I ask you, since a balcony is permitted there, and it is permitted to project 1.5 meters, your argument was that that when people move along through the back on the public way, and I think I'm boring some words because you've been in front of us before, why would this projection of a little bit more, when a balcony is already permitted, this slight projection more offend you, or perhaps a poor choice of words, but.
Yeah, so this could have consequences on the neighboring property that is not built yet, and I'm sure they're going through. They did come and present their case here. They're probably going to come back. But I remember very clearly the architect did mention something about the balconies of the neighboring properties. So what does that do to this new property? It may push it further to the public space. It may make it bigger. We don't know how they're gonna interpret that. And depending on their desires, the laws are here for a reason, and it's to prevent these things. So, I mean, my main question is, if there was a violation of the height of the home, why is this?
I'm sorry, this is the second
yeah.
time I'm hearing you say there is a
Yeah.
violation for the height of the home. There is no, we don't have any reference to such, and maybe the planner can.
So,
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair. The variance that's before you this evening is specifically to deal with the projection of the balcony from the rear face of the wall.
yeah, so that's not, I mean, that's true, but it's not really answering the fact that the development is already violating certain things, and it's being allowed to continue to gain variances.
No, I'm going to have to disagree
Yeah.
with you. Usually, if the development has had other variances approved to them, and typically a height variance would be within our wheelhouse, we would actually have a notification assigned to this file to let us know that they've been previously in front of us and they've been previously approved for a height variation. That did not happen, so they have not. They are within their rights. The height is in accordance with the zoning bylaw. And then now, the only thing that's before us is this projection in the balcony. And what I'd like to know, and perhaps the members can as well, is how it affects you directly. I don't want to hear about what the neighboring properties are going to face, because if they have a problem, they should be here unless you're representing them.
Well, they're vacant lands, right? And the laws are there to particularly serve the situation. It's
And you've
for when
heard
somebody-
from the planner that they have submitted and are in accordance with the zoning bylaw, except for this projection, and it has already been through site plan. So
So just a comment on the height. The height actually was initially indicated as a variance, and then they went back and said, no, there's a change in the reference point, which made it within. But then, again, we received communication through our ward councillor that the staff that there's a potential of putting a stop order to look into that and address it. We haven't heard anything back on that. I know this is a different matter. I'm just bringing forward here that there seems to be a lack of respect for these bylaws, which have a purpose.
I'm not going to agree with you that there is a lack of respect to the zoning bylaws. I understand that there are some people out there that might have a lack of respect to the zoning bylaw. But what I'd like to hear from the planner is, have you heard any of these rumors that are coming before us? Because we haven't.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the committee and to the resident. If you would recall, this property was subject to variances prior to it receiving a site plan approval, namely for side yard setbacks as it addressed the tree line that's on the more eastern side of the property. The house was shifted westerly to accommodate an additional buffer. And Mr. Hicks, who's here this evening, can probably go into more detail about that particular instance as well. Through the evolution of the development and when the builder had proceeded with building the structure, staff are to understand that at that time there was an instance of the grade or the specific grade with respect to the front property line and where the foundation had been laid. My understanding, in consultation, the applicant with engineering staff at the town have resolved that issue. So there is no height issue, there's no height variance before this committee. The proposal, as far as I'm to understand, does comply with the bylaw with respect to height. The only matter before you this evening is to deal with the balcony at the rear, which had once complied with the bylaw at the time of final site plan approval, but the bylaw had changed prior to the applicant getting their building permit.
Okay, thank you. For the interest of everyone here, we do need to move along. Are there any questions of Mr. Solomon? I see none. We will now ask Mr. Hicks to come and respond to your comments. Mr. Hicks, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I don't have a lot to offer other than, as Kate has said, it is bringing it into conformance and compliance with what has already been approved by site plan. I will offer just very briefly that there was a question raised during construction about the height of the foundation. The question was asked, the question was answered, the surveyor confirmed, and engineering approved. So that is not an issue that's on the table. There is no non-compliance with building heights. So it's really a very simple application. And to answer the question with respect to privacy to the adjacent property to the west, one of the conditions of site plan was that we build a screen wall on that side of the balcony, and that is part of site plan approval. So it is screened fully.
Fully screened. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hicks. Are there any questions of Mr. Hicks? I see none. We will now take this matter into committee. Thank you. So as you have heard, the matter before us is simply the projection of the balcony that was once approved under the zoning bylaw and has now come into contention with the changes, and it has been through site plan. I'm in your hands. Mr. Charlebois, thank you.
Madam Chair, having listened to the presentation tonight and read the staff report as well as my site visit, as well as the comments from the resident, I feel that this is one of those clear cases of why a committee of adjustment is here to just correct these little things that go along. We have a situation where on July 29th, this was site plan approved, agreed to by everyone. Later on, as we know, our bylaw is going through some amendments and some changes as we finalize it. A slight change is made, and then under that, technically the balcony isn't permitted, and I think that's not correct. So I'm going to actually support this motion. And just let me check here because, yeah, so there were, subject to the condition here that the proposed development be constructed in general accordance with the final approved site plan to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services. And subject further, I guess, to the fact that this bylaw will expire within 2 years if you don't get a building permit for that particular balcony.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois. So the motion is to approve with the set forth conditions. All those in, is there a discussion on this recommendation, first of all? I see none. All those who approve? Okay, it's been approved. Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Your application has been approved.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I won't be back for any more balconies.
Okay, we'll take your word for it. All right, moving on. We are now looking at CAV 170 of 2016 at 439 Seabourn Drive. Good evening.
Good evening, committee staff. My name is Steve Hamlin. Address is 145 Lakeshore Road East, Unit 200.
Mr. Hamlet, just give me one moment to survey the public. Is there anyone here in attendance for CAV 170 439 Seabourn Drive? You are. I am assuming you're in opposition? Yes. Okay. So, Mr. Hamlet, we will listen to your presentation, and then we will invite the members in the public to come and speak their concerns.
Okay.
Sorry. Before we do that, we do need to highlight the changes that have resulted in your application because of the changes in the bylaw.
Variance number 3 is no longer required.
Okay, so
Which is,
now speaking only to variance 1 and 2.
can somebody remind me what variance 3 is for?
It's floor area lot ratio for a detached dwelling with a lot area between 701 meters squared and 800 meters squared.
Okay, thank you. Quickly, we're going for 2 variances. One is for front yard setback, and the other one is for the lot area ratio.
Actually, no, you're going for residential floor area.
Residential floor, thank you.
Yes.
In regards to the front yard setback, we've pulled the house forward to be in line with the other 2 adjacent properties, to be in line with the streetscape. And then for the GFA, we have an increase, and that is to accommodate the wish list of my client.
Is that all?
That's simply, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Hamlin, would you take a seat? Will I have one member represent the group? Thank you. Kindly come forward, sir. Good evening. Your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Earl Wees. I live at 430 Seabourn Drive, which is across the street and just 2 houses north.
Sorry, repeat that number again.
430 Seabourn Drive.
430. Thank you.
Okay. This is what's proposed to be added to a lot in an area with single family homes, average size 1,000 square feet to 1,200 square feet. The only thing that's missing from this is a moat, I think, because it's huge. But that's what we have bylaws are for. What I'm objecting to are variance number 1, which would give an extra 25 square meters, that's 5 meters by 5 meters, of extra floor space to this monstrous house. And the other thing is variance number 2, the setback. He wants to move it 4 meters closer than it is at the present time. So I'm objecting to both of those. They make it look out of place in the community, and It'll be another big house on our street that's constantly for sale and never sold. Thank you.
Hold on one second. Is there any questions of Mr. Weiss?
I'm just, the size of the house, I understand, it's the moving of the house forward. The applicant said he's basically doing it to line up with the other houses, which is actually what the town of Oakville likes to see, is some sort of continuity of the houses. You just said you didn't want it to move closer, but you really didn't say why. Like,
Well, no, if it's lining up with the other houses, I guess we can't really object. But one of the things that I do object mainly to is the size of the house.
size, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's humongous compared to any of the other 1,000 to 1,200 square foot houses in the area.
So staff has made a comment in here, which I'm sure you've read, that this seems to fit in with the rest of the area, and you do not agree.
No, I don't agree.
Okay.
There's, on our street, there's 1, 2, 3 of those monstrous type houses built. And as I say, they're constantly for sale. Nobody can ever sell them. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Mr. Hamlin, if you can come back and respond, and then the committee will have questions for you.
For the size of the house, I have to agree with planning's comments that, we are in accordance with other houses in the neighborhood. So, I feel this is minor in nature.
However, perhaps you can tell the committee what the need for the extra space is. I mean, you can build just as big a house within the bylaws. So what's pushing this house to those limits?
This would be the wish list of the homeowner, is why we pushed it to this limit.
Are there any questions of Mr. Hammond? Okay, I see none. Thank you. We'll take this matter into committee. I'll give you a moment. There are 2 conditions that come with the staff's support.
Sorry, can I just raise something? You're aware of the conditions that are in here if we're to accept it. One is something to do with
A tree.
The landscape?
something to do with the removal of an existing mature tree, submitting a landscape plan. You're fine with that?
I'm fine with that. You're fine with that? Yep.
Okay.
That's fine.
Who will move a motion? Either way, then we can have a discussion. Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm going to move this application be approved as amended with the removal of variance number 3. Madam Chair, I find this application does meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act. And I will note that the committee did hear from neighbor in opposition. I think when questioned, the neighbor admitted that the front yard setback to line up the houses was not necessarily the issue. Clearly, there's concern about the size of the dwelling. And I believe he mentioned a neighborhood of 1,000 to 1,200 square foot dwellings. I think it's worth noting that as of right, the applicant can build over 3,000 square feet on this property, and the variance being requested, approximately 300 square feet, or the size of the, I think, family room in the back of the house. I don't believe that the neighbor's concern would be alleviated if this house actually did comply, and that room in the back of the house, something the size of that room in the back of the house was removed. I don't think it would change the streetscape or the neighbor's issues with the fact that the bylaw, I think, allows this primarily as of right. So with that, Madam Chair, I'll also make my recommendation for approval, subject to the conditions, 2 conditions requested by staff that you previously noted, and that a permit issue within 2 years.
Thank you, Mr. Talowski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Mr. Charlebois?
Just for the everybody here, it's always tough when we're looking at buildings that are larger, but one of the things I want to note about this, at least how I look at it, is I look at the entire building envelope. And what we have is a situation here where the side yards are quite generous. And the building itself is not maxing over the maximum lot coverage. So we have an application here where the person is working within the building envelope, compromising in some areas and asking for a little bit more in others. And that's exactly one of the reasons why you can come to the Committee of Adjustment. It's not a strict law, but all these other factors get taken into account, each one of us looking at it in our own right. So for that reason, I am going to support this because I find that the design of this is quite sympathetic to the lot and to the neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois. Are there any other comments? I see none. The recommendation is to approve the application with the set forth conditions as stated on record. All those in support? Okay, it's been 3 years. Thank you, Mr. Hammond. Your application has been approved.
Thank you.
CAV 171 at 1031 Cedar Grove Boulevard. Okay.
Good evening, Madam Chair and the rest committee members. My name is Emily Vey. I'm from John Wilmot Architect's office, and I'm here to represent the homeowners, Ms. Fortin and Mr. Jedrzejewicz.
Thank you. Just permit me to survey the audience. Is there anyone here in attendance for CAV 171 at 1031 Cedar Grove Boulevard? I see none. So our procedural bylaw allows us to forego with the presentation. We've all done our site visit. We're familiar with your application. Before I do that, do you have anything further to say to the committee, or you wish to present?
I've none, except to just mention, and I'm sure you're aware of it, that planning staff has contacted us about the conditions, and we are aware of that and support that.
Perfect, thank you. And there are some amendments to your application.
To Madam Chair, variance number 2 is removed, and from variance number 3, only section 39B1, BI, is removed from the variance request.
Oh,
Okay, how does that affect the numbers? It's the same, right? It's just that?
Yep.
Okay. So we are speaking to variance 1 and 3 to permit the interior side yard of 1.8 meters and to permit a minimum front yard of 4.48. Members, do you have any questions of Ms. Vera?
Just to confirm, it was section 39 that was removed?
Yes, section 39BI
So table 631 stays in?
stays,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
Do you have any questions of the applicant and agent? I see none. So Ms. Vera will take this matter into committee. Thank
Yes.
you. Members, I'm in your hands. Who would like to move a motion? You've all done your site visits. You're familiar with the application. Oh, Mr. Hardcastle.
Madam Chair,
I almost forgot you there.
That's right. No, having visited the site and reviewed the materials, including the staff presentation, I'm satisfied that the requested variances conform to the 4 tests of the Act. I'll put forward a motion of approval subject to 3 conditions. The first being that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated August 30th. The second being that the applicant provide a construction and tree preservation plan to the satisfaction of the Director of Development Engineering. And the third being that the variance will expire within 2 years if a building permit has not been issued.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Vera. Your application has been approved.
thank you.
We are now calling application CAV 172 at 26 Holyrood Avenue. And while the agent comes down, who is here in support or in opposition of application CAV 172 at 26 Holyrood Avenue? Mr. Hicks, are you in support or in opposition? In support with one minor comment. Okay, so you would like a moment at the podium? 30 seconds. Okay. So do we require a presentation of this? Members, I'm in your hands. We've all done our site visits. Would you like a presentation from, sorry, before I even ask you that question, you should put your name and address on the record.
Sure. My name is Brian Williams.
Brian Williams.
I live at 176 Sarah Street in Milton.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Do you have any questions of Mr. Williams, or do you require a presentation?
No, my question was going to be about what Mr. Hicks wrote anyway, so sounds
Okay.
like he's coming up.
Okay, perfect. Our procedural bylaw does allow us to forgo with the presentation. We're all familiar with the cases and we've done our site visits.
Sure.
Do you have anything further to say to the committee before I invite Mr. Hicks to speak?
No, only that Bill and I have been speaking about this issue over the past 2 weeks or so, and so I'll just leave it up to him to
Very well, thank you very much,
leave
sir.
his comment.
And while Mr. Hicks comes down, the Secretary Treasurer will inform us of the changes that have been affected this application.
Only section 28, so variance number 2, section 28.1.
28.1
removed,
is
yeah.
removed, section 28.1. Mr. Hicks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I said, we are in support of the application. Brian and I have had a number of discussions. I'm representing the owners of 32 Holyrood, Stephen and Janet Wetmore.
Okay.
Our only concern that we just wanted on the record is that we do have some issues with tree preservation. We know that that will be and should be taken up with the site plan committee. I don't believe it's going to impact the nature of the variances that they're asking for right now, but one of the reasons that there is some tree preservation issues is because of the front yard or the house being moved further back on the property. That being said, we do support it, and we will take our tree issues to the site plan committee, and we've already had some discussions with Mr. Thun and Planning Department about that. So.
Very well. Yes, you are indeed correct. It is subject to site plan, and I see our planner, Ms. Mihalovic, is ready to take down the podium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is just to confirm Mr. Hicks's comments. I've spoken with the planner, Rob Thun, this afternoon. These matters will be managed through the site plan process and then through the landscaping plan, and then would be fully enforced through that particular application. It does not impact the variance that is before you, and as such, no conditions of staff have been requested as it relates to those matters. They'll be handled by the site plan process.
Okay, perfect. There is only one condition that is stipulated on record, that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the final approved site plan to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services. That one stands.
That is correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Are there any questions further to this discussion? Okay, we will now take the matter into committee. Who would like to move a motion for this application? Mr. Charlebois, thank you.
Madam Chairman, having listened to the presentation here, as well as Mr. Hicks and the response from planning, as well as my site visit and reading the documentation that's been provided to us, I do find that this particular application does meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act. I recommend that, or put forward, sorry, a motion that it be approved, subject to the condition that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the final approved site plan to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services, and subject further to the condition that this approval will expire in 2 years from the date of this decision if the proposed development does not proceed or a building permit is not issued.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Very well. Application has been approved. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Moving on to application CAV 173 at 70 Ennisclare Drive. Oh, Ms. Mihalovic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before Mr. Ricci comes down to give his presentation to you, I thought I would take this opportunity. I'm hoping that the Secretary Treasurer has provided you with information in advance of this evening that staff comments that were provided with respect to 70 Ennisclare are in support of the application on the basis of revised drawings that Mr. Ricci has prepared for you. These were comments and discussions that staff have had with Mr. Ricci prior to me going on holidays last week. And unfortunately, there was some miscommunication in the release of comments in advance of Mr. Ricci's revisions being incorporated into our comments. The changes that are being proposed is an elimination of a number of variances as well as a reduction in the variances requested as kind of a domino effect of the change that's been requested. And it is the revised plan that staff are supportive of. The effect of this change was to comply with the requested side yard setback, the interior side yard setback that the applicant had requested on variance number 7. By complying with this side yard setback, there have been reductions or further reductions in the floor area that has been requested for the dwelling, the lot coverage, as well as the garage floor area. So these were minor changes that affected the overall plan. And through you, Madam Chair, and to the committee, respectfully, staff would request you to consider our revised position to support the application, that it does meet the 4 tests, that it is in keeping with the character of the neighborhood, and does not present any negative impacts on the surrounding community. And Mr. Ricci has revised plans to provide you to that effect if you'd like to take a moment to look at them.
Okay. We don't have that information. We did not get it in time, so we'll take the time to.
I was just wondering, you said there were changes in here, but the one that I'm looking at, does that already incorporate the changes?
No, we didn't get it in time. That's
No,
what she's saying.
So
through you,
can-
Madam
can-
Chair, if I
Can
may.
you actually tell me what the
Yes.
changes were?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, if Gus would like to deliver the plans to the Secretary Treasurer for distribution. On the notice that you've received for this evening, variance number 1 is removed. Variance number 2 will be, rather than 33.91% increase, it is 33.44%. Variance number 3, instead of 30.18%, it is 29.56%. Number 4 remains unchanged. Number 5 is removed. Number 6, I believe remains, but I'll have the Secretary Treasurer confirm because it reflects the.
Number 6 is removed.
It is removed? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Thank you. Number 7 is removed.
Actually, number 7, what is removed is section 39B under the zoning, the old zoning bylaw.
Madam Chair, if I may, variance 7 is removed entirely because the applicant now complies with the side yard
Okay.
setback.
Okay. So there's compliance here.
That's correct. And number 8, I would propose that it's just the regulations applicable under 2014-14 remains the same.
Okay. Now we need Mr. Ricci to take us through them in terms of the plans. Before I do that, sorry, did you want to say something? Before I do that, Mr. Ricci, give me a second to survey the audience. Is there anyone here with interest in application CAV 173 at 70 Ennis Clare Drive? Okay, I see none. So this is for our benefit, for us to understand what the application that is before us today, and give us an opportunity to understand it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Gus Ricci. I'm the architect and agent representing the owner at 70 Ennis Clare Drive West. The application before you this evening is for the construction of a new 2-story home to replace an existing bungalow on the west side of Ennis Clare Drive. As Kate mentioned, our initial application included variances that in planning staff's review, planning felt that they could not support the application. So we went back to the client, discussed some changes, and came up with a revised set of drawings. The major change in the set of drawings that was originally submitted to you versus the current set that I just submitted to the committee this evening is the elimination of variance number 7, which previously requested a side yard variance of 3.75. By revising the design of the home, we were able to eliminate that variance, thereby meeting the northerly side yard setback of 4.2 meters. that also affected a reduction in the floor area and coverage to the extent that we actually were able to eliminate variance number 5, which was previously a variance for coverage. We no longer require that under the old 1984 bylaw. We've also eliminated the variance for increased increase in garage area. We no longer require that. And I believe you'll see that I was able to do a chart comparing the previous variances requested to the current variances being proposed this evening. And I do apologize for dropping a lot of information on you this evening, but as Kate suggested, there was just a matter of not getting it back in time through the channels and planning staff. I may add also that we do meet all the other major bylaw setbacks with respect to the front yard, rear yard, and a very important height bylaw. We're well within those requirements. The building depth requirement variance is strictly because of a small bay that projects across the back of the building. If by reviewing the drawings, you'll note that most of the home, whoops, upside down. Most of the second story of the home is actually quite contained within the roof line, thereby reducing the mass of the building. So that's the street elevation. The rear elevation, again, is consistent in that it displays itself as mainly a 1.5 story type building with the predominant roof line coming down to the first story. And then the south side elevation, again, roof line comes down quite low with a small gable to the second story. And then the northerly elevation, where again the eaves is basically at the first story height. So we believe by the design of the roof lines, the impact of although we're asking for increase in GFA and floor area, the impact is negated by the fact that we have a fairly low slung roof.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, I'd like to actually also submit to you, very important, is our client has gone around and canvassed the neighbors, and we've received letters of support from essentially neighbors at 58, 63, 71, 78, 79, 86, and 87 Ennisclair. And we've also received a letter of support from the property owner at 1312 Lakeshore Road East. And I have copies of those letters here.
Perfect, thank you. If you'd be kind enough to submit them to the Secretary Treasurer.
And I'd like to highlight that you may have noticed in the planning staff comments that previously the owner of 1312 was concerned about the issue of trees in the rear yard, but our client has talked to them, and I believe now they're satisfied with our project, in that we're also going to be going through site alteration permit and dealing with trees at that stage as well.
Very well, thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Ricci? No? Okay, thank you. Mr. Ricci will now take this into committee. Members, you've heard the presentation, you've looked at the changes. Yes.
To Madam Chair, I do have one question. The agent has revised the variance number 2 for number 2 for 33.44. It was 3391.
Right.
In the brackets, did you revise the size of the building? Because I do have on the variance original 504.22 square meters. Do you have any numbers revised?
Yes, it's 33.44%, and the area is 497.17 square meters. It's actually on the the chart that I provided.
Thank you. Members, if you're satisfied with the presentation and no questions are there for Mr. Ricci or Ms. Mihalovic, would you kindly submit a motion? Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Ricci, when I first looked at this application, I thought this is the way to apply for a variance. You're asking for greater coverage in floor area, but you've designed the house in such a way that you'd never know it, and it fits into the neighborhood. This is not the way to come and present to this committee. You should have asked for a deferral. And if this happens again, I really hope you will, because it's not fair to the committee, it's not fair to the audience to have to sit through the revisions, ask the committee to look at these drawings on the fly. Having said that, sending you away to come back really would serve no purpose. Madam Chair, despite the way this was presented, I do believe that this is minor variance. It meets the four tests of the Planning Act. And I would move it be approved, subject to development proceeding in accordance with the drawings provided, and that a building permit issue within 2 years.
Thank you, Mr. Tlowski. The drawings that were submitted have a date?
The revised drawings.
Yes, the revised drawings. Dated October 11, 2016. Thank you. Is there any discussion on this recommendation? I see none. Okay. Sorry? Mr. Yeah, Mark, sorry. This is our Director of Planning. If the mic's working.
That's right.
There you go.
I would like to clarify for the record, the error in which you were referring, the member was referring to is entirely the fault of staff. The agent here this evening had provided us the information. There was a vacation and people weren't aware of it, and there was no intent to anything other than we failed to put the right information together at a staff level. I just want to go on record to identify that it was staff that caused that problem, and I apologize for that.
Thank you, Mark. For the benefit of the public, and we don't usually take applications on the fly, and usually if there are more than one change on the application that do affect the envelope as well as the size and the various calculations in the application, we usually do ask the applicant to go back and seek a deferral. So for the benefit of the public, that is the correct process, and I do agree with Mr. Talowski, but having the explanation from our planning staff that it was by their account and not of yours, we appreciate that, and we've certainly taken the matter and submitted a decision for it. So I'll now ask them to vote on the application recommendation. All those in support of Mr. Talowski's motion to approve, subject to the three conditions that were stated? Thank you. All those in support. Mr. Ricci, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The next application that is before us is CAV 174 at 2100 Lakeshore Road East. Mr. Hicks.
Madam Chair, members, I know you're getting tired of seeing me tonight, but
That's okay. Let me just survey the audience behind you. Is there anyone here present for CAV 174 2016 at 2100 Lakeshore Road? Okay, I see none. Now, this is quite intensive in terms of the recommendations or conditions that are set before us as per staff as well as Conservation Halton. Members, is there any questions of Mr. Hicks? Do you require a presentation? Okay, I see none. Mr. Hicks, is there anything else that you'd like to say to the committee, given that we're familiar with the application and we can forego with the presentation?
I think it's truly a very technical set of variances. It's existing house, so, and the additions at the basement level, so.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hicks, for those comments. Members, in your hands, there are several conditions on record, and I'll be happy to read them. Should you, oh, sorry, the Secretary Treasurer does want to notify us of the changes.
Just variance number 3 removed from the request.
So we are only speaking to variance 1 and 2, and that affects the maximum dwelling depth as well as the permitted height for the accessory building. Are there any questions?
Just a question, Madam Chairman, on your conditions. I saw the conditions from conservation, but I thought that staff had sort of summarized it just into one. Am I correct in reading that? Or
I have 3 in front of me. I'm happy to read them. Would you like me to read them and then you can comment on them?
Through you, Madam Chair, staff prepare their comments independently and often don't receive the comments from the Conservation Authority prior to the application being responded to. And again, having been on holidays, I'm not sure that we had ever received the comments from the Conservation Authority. I had had discussions with representatives of the CH with respect to the application. They will be subject to a permit in the normal manner to be released through them. Again, it's a matter of applicable law that they'll need to satisfy separate from any approvals that this committee may grant this evening.
all right. So, Mr. Hicks, are you familiar with the conditions from the Conservation Authority?
Yes, we met with them very first thing on the site. Essentially, they don't have any great issues. We have discussed the fact that that basement space is not a habitable space. It's a sports room.
Yeah.
And our final discussions are with respect to the existing boathouse, which they know is being reconstructed. They support that. But we're having discussions with respect to the replacement of a rail system that goes into the lake, and they want some details on that. So,
Okay.
so I'm satisfied with the conditions. We are fine with meeting all of those. So.
All right.
Very well, thank you. Are there any other items of clarification or questions? I see none. Okay, so we will take this matter into committee. Who would like to move a motion on this application? Mr. Hardcastle, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having reviewed the materials, I'm satisfied that the requested variances conform to the 4 tests of the Act, and I'll put forth a motion of approval, subject to, I'll take the position along with staff that the Conservation Authority requirements are applicable law, and I don't think we need to burden our decision with additional conditions. So subject to 2 conditions, the first being that the proposed additions be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated September 19th, 2016, in addition to our standard condition that the variance would expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued.
There's also a third condition that staff had stipulated, that the proposed green roof terrace with sports room below remains.
That's part of conservation.
Okay,
That was my reading of it, as that was related to the Conservation Authority, and then they can pick that up through their permitting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. I misread it. Those are the conditions. Mr. Hicks, you're familiar and satisfied with those conditions? Thank you.
Yes.
All those in support? Very well. The
Thank you, Madam
application
Chair.
has been approved.
Members.
Thank you. This application that is before us next is CAV 111 of 2016 at 133 Rebecca Street, and it was deferred from June 21st of 2016. Hello. Is there anyone here for application CAV 111, 2016, at 133 Rebecca Street? There is none. Okay. Thank you. This application before us is for the parking spaces and the landscaping parkways at the Oakville Arena on Spears. Are there any questions? Before I do that, sorry, your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Nigel Tai from Diamond Schmidt Architects, representing the owner of the subject property, 133 Rebecca Street. The owner of the property is Town of Oakville.
Thank you, Mr. Tai. We are familiar with the application, and as I've stated before, the committee does have the luxury to forego on presentations if there is a need to do so. Members, are there any questions of Mr. Tai about the application? Mr. Charlebois?
Mr. Tai, just for the purposes of this, because your documentation was extensive, you wouldn't have a copy of the site plan there in front of you, would you?
I do have a copy of the site plans.
Yeah. My only question was, when I drove around the site, I mean, the whole basis of your thing was that you can't find any more parking spots. But if you don't mind just shifting that thing, there's this area along Fenlon Avenue, Fellon Avenue. And so if you just shift it a little bit towards there you go. You see there's a little parking area, and I was just wondering, did you guys look at trying to create some extra parking spots in there? I couldn't really see where that was addressed, and just for the matter of record, I want to know if you looked at that and why you couldn't find any spots there.
You mean along the street?
Yeah, like along because the whole idea was you couldn't find any spots because it would affect the facilities. But as you can see, that parking lot could probably expand, and that was just my observation. Why couldn't you find the parking spots there?
In this particular area here, there's actually the region's easement of the underground infrastructure over there, which prohibited us from further developments over there. So that's
all I needed
really
to know. Okay. So you can't do it there. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois. Are there any further questions of Mr. Tai? Mr. Tai, do you have anything additional to add to the application that we don't have on record through this this submission?
Nope.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll take this matter into committee. Gentlemen, I'm in your hands for a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll put forward having reviewed the material here as well as taking into account the staff report. I do note that there was nobody here from the public objecting to this thing. I do find that that this particular application meets the 4 tests under the Planning Act. I'll put forward a motion that it be approved, subject to the condition that the proposed development be constructed in accordance with the final approved site plan to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services, and further that the condition that the approval will expire in 2 years from the date of this decision if the proposed development does not proceed or a building permit is not issued.
Very well, thank you. The proposal is to approve the application as with the set conditions. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. Thank you, Mr. Tai.
Thank you very much.
We're now calling application CAV 125 of 2016 at 6790, at 520 Pine Grove Road. Okay. Good evening, your name and record name.
Yeah, good evening, Madam Chair, Committee. My name is Maninder Baraj.
Baraj, Mr. Baraj. And your address?
My address is 16 Owens Road, Brampton, Ontario.
Okay, thank you. Just give me a moment to survey the public. Is there anyone here for application CAV 125 at 520 Pine Grove Road? Are you in opposition or in support? You're in opposition. Thank you. So we will hear your presentation and then give them a chance to speak their concerns.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Committee members, so the only variance we are asking for is to permit a maximum floor area for increased private garage from 45 square meter to 67.5 square meters. Everything else is within the bylaws.
Okay. And it's our understanding that this request that's set before us today is actually internal, so there is no effect on the streetscape?
No.
It's all inside the garage so that you can have two cars in tandem, correct?
Yes, correct.
Thank you. Sir, madam, would you like to come and address the committee?
My name's Ann Jensen, and we live at 527 Pine Grove.
527 Pine Grove. Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. So what are your concerns this evening? How can we help answer whatever questions you may have?
No, we know it's going to be a bigger house, taller. But we like to know is why does he have to have a bigger garage?
Okay. That's a fair question. I simply asked him the question pertaining to the size of the garage. It's all within inside the envelope of the house, so you will not see a big garage from the streetscape. Does that help you?
No, because we're looking right into the property.
Right. You're not going to see a three-door garage, for instance. You're only going to see the regular size two-door garage, but the bigger space is actually within the envelope. It's inside, so it's not visible from the street from where you're looking.
So it's towards the backyard.
Exactly. It's towards the back. It's inside the house, so you'll never really know if you were looking from outside whether it's two or three-car garage.
Okay.
Does that help you?
Yeah.
Thank you. We appreciate you coming down and asking the question.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any questions? Okay, no. Mr. Barrage? Do you have anything further to add to the committee before we take the matter into committee?
No.
Okay, thank you. If there aren't any questions, we're ready to take this matter into committee. Mr. Talowski, this is an easy one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll move this application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets the four tests of the Planning Act. It's clearly a well-designed house. It's nice to see a house in this neighborhood coming forward without a floor area variance request. And I will note that we did hear from one resident who had some concerns about the garage, and that appears to have been explained to her satisfaction. Make the approval to recommend, or recommendation to approve, subject to construction being in general accordance with the drawings provided, and that a building permit issue within 2 years.
Thank you, Mr. Chowsky. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Your application has been approved. The next application that is before us is CAV 143-2012. It's a no, this is wrong. It's a CAV 2016, right? It's supposed to be? 12? Okay, and it's deferred from September 13th, 2016 at 3358 Lakeshore Road West.
Good evening, Madam Chair. My name is Russ Cheeseman. I'm the solicitor for the owner of the property, Dr. Soriel. With me is the land use planner from Sorensen Gray, or SGL Planning.
The name of your planner? For records?
David Riley.
David Riley, Mr.
Yes.
Riley, thank
And
you.
we're back again. We were here just over a month ago, and we ended up being deferred because of a 2-2 tie vote. In the interim, while we were waiting for this matter to come back on, we listened to some of the comments that were made at by the committee at the previous time.
Mr. Cheeseman, I don't mean to cut you off, but just for a moment, I need to survey the audience. Is there anyone here for CAV 143 of 2012 at 3358 Lakeshore Road West? Okay, there isn't?
No.
Yes, and now you may proceed with your presentation. As you know, that town is not in support, and there are some changes to the bylaws that affect your application, so we're going to
Oh.
read those on record.
Okay.
There's actually 3 of them.
Help me
Yes.
out. Hang on one sec, okay? Go ahead.
Variance number 6, 7, and 8 were removed from the
So we are
requirement.
now speaking to only variance 1 through 5.
Okay. Thank you. So with respect to that, since the last committee meeting, we went away, listened to some of the comments that were made by some of the members of the committee with respect to the size and the gross floor area. And we can advise that the notice as prepared for this evening's committee was changed. And in fact, the numbers that are before you are now reflective of a change in the overall gross floor area of the building has been reduced by about 580 square feet. So we have some sheets here that might be of assistance so that the committee can follow along.
So why were these not filed ahead of time with the,
The notice was filed.
the notice?
The
was
numbers
filed?
were filed. The drawings were finalized after the date. So the drawings, but the drawings are before you, and it really just shows a reduction in the overall floor plate of the building. But the numbers that are reflected on the notice that went out to the public are all accurate. So if I could just give you, if you look at the, there's a list of changes sheet at the front that will assist you. You'll see that the residential floor area ratio has been decreased from what was 36.55% in zone to 33.3%. That's a minus 3.25%. So the variance has been reduced. Bylaw 1984-63, I guess we're not going to deal with. The lot coverage has been reduced from 2955 to 2827, which is a 1.28% reduction. And again, that reflects the 580 square feet that has been removed from the overall size of the dwelling. The east side setback and the west side yard setbacks, no variances were ever required for those, but as a result of the building shrinking in size, those side yards had in fact been increased. So the setbacks have been increased, and you can see that reflected on the drawings, and we have them here. Mr. Yeah, put them up.
Can I just clarify one of your statements here? Because you said the notice had been amended, but right now the notice with respect to lot coverage still says 29.55.
Yes, that's what I'm reading as well.
Are you requesting that it be reduced to 28.27?
28.27 is what it should be listed at, sir. And if you look at the second page that we handed up, you'll see the revised list of variances. So now I guess we're only dealing with the top 5 as opposed to 7. So you'll see that the
Okay,
different...
hold on, Mr. Cheeseman.
Yep.
Because what's in front of us here is not what we were given in submissions. And I need to clarify all of this, and you already spoke to us, and you already heard us speak to Mr. Ricci about last-minute changes. Staff, are you aware of these changes? Have you been given notice of them? Can we speak to them?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the committee, no, staff have not received any notice of said changes. The planner on file for the site plan application was unaware of the changes or revisions that have been made. And as noted in our comments and as noted on the notice, no revised plans were submitted with this revised application, irrespective of the modifications that Mr. Cheeseman is making on the floor this evening. So staff cannot provide any comments or be given the opportunity to evaluate the application in this shortened time frame. And I would highlight that the earlier application we had undergone with Mr. Ricci, staff at least had the benefit of reviewing those modifications in advance in order to provide you with advice this evening. So I'm at a loss in order to provide the committee with any advice other than what we had previously provided on the submissions from the last time this was before you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mihailovic. So this is not the way we proceed, as you've heard me speak before. So you have, you forego on the chance to get a deferral in order for these changes and revisions to be submitted through the proper channel and then come before us. That was your choice in the beginning of this meeting. Now, I will leave it up to the committee to decide what to do, but as a chairman of this committee, I am not prepared to proceed with this presentation, nor will I hear your application because it has not gone through the proper channels.
Well, if it's the committee's wish to defer us once again, I guess I'm in your hands.
Hold on, I'm getting away from my Secretary Treasurer.
Through Madam Chair, last time when we deferred the application, basically the applicant said that it's on your request and deferral fee was not imposed. This time, if you again defer the application, the deferral fee is not going to be applicable to them. But the applicant and agent, they had a chance to defer again. We asked them, but they want to proceed with their notice without the drawings.
Okay, that's a valid point from the...
And as I said, the notice was changed. We put the notice in.
The notice was not have changed, sir. The notice changed on number 2, that said 33.3. I have the notice before me, and it says 29.55 for variance number 3, which by your record and your submission tonight should read 28.27. So I don't believe that that statement is correct.
Right. There is a reduction in that number.
Yes, so
Right.
the
So
notice
it's
did not
reduced.
go out correctly as you had suggested in the beginning of your presentation.
Okay. But the number has still gone down. It decreased.
Regardless of the fact that that is not the way we conduct our business. We need to have things ahead of time. The planners on record need to have submissions,
Right in your
and
hands,
we
ma'am.
need to have those drawings ahead of time. This is my opinion. I will take this matter into committee for discussion. Members, I'm in your hands. You've heard what the Secretary Treasurer has said. Is there an opinion about this? Mr. Charlebois?
If I can make a suggestion to you, I think you're heading in the right direction. And there was a lot of discussion here, as you know, last time. I think what we've got here is if I'm just going to give you my opinion. If you want to come forward to us to ask for a decision, I will be either giving a yes or a no, and I won't be giving a deferral. So you can choose to do what you wish, but I think what I'm hearing here is I think the suggestion is maybe you guys apply for the deferral as opposed to us suggesting a deferral, because I'm really here just to vote yes or no.
Ma'am, can we stand this matter down?
Till the end of this meeting? Sure, we can do that. I'll give you that courtesy. And in that meantime, we need to look up our procedural bylaw to make sure that we're doing this the right way in terms of requesting a deferral within the meeting after the fact.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Cheeseman. I will proceed with the next application, and that will be CAV 166 at 332 Robinson Street.
Thank you, and good evening.
Sorry, just give me a second, Mrs. Baker.
Certainly.
Good evening. So let me just gather my thoughts one more time. We are looking at CAV 166 2016 at 332 Robinson Street, correct?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is correct.
I realize that I know we are going to hit the jackpot with the audience today, so I need to do this for the record. All those who are here with the interest in CAV 166 2016, please raise your hands. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I'm assuming you've heard the proceedings and you've been here before. How many people are going to be addressing the committee? And if you can group everyone together, that would be ideal. But given that there is quite a few of you, I'm willing to entertain that there, 2 or 3 of you speak in terms of grouping this entire group together. I believe we have 3 speakers? Very well. And is that okay with everyone? Okay. Mrs. Baker, you please proceed, and then we'll go from there.
Certainly, and I thank the residents for grouping into 3. I think it'll make for a more efficient proceeding. So Denise Baker, Weirfolds LLP, here on behalf counsel for the applicant, and with me is Mr. Bill Hicks, the architect for the project. I'm just going to speak to a number of the items in the staff report and in the planning opinion that was provided by Mr. Ramsey on behalf of the Ratepayers Association. And then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hicks, who will describe issues of impact for you from an architectural perspective. So as you know, the variances before you, and I think this is very important because I think we're going to hear a lot about variances that are in fact not before you, Madam Chair. And so it's the elimination of a dedicated visitors parking space, a front yard setback of 1 meter, and the minimum setback for a rooftop terrace for the edge of the roof to be 0.5 meters. There are 4 rooftop terraces in this project, Madam Chair. This setback variance applies to only 2 of them as it relates to units 3 and 4 on the project. And I'm going to leave that variance for Mr. Hicks to speak to you from an impact perspective. I'd like to start with the staff report, Madam Chair, because I think there's been a bit of a misunderstanding that I'd like to be clarified. In the, what I would say in the second full paragraph under the heading analysis in the staff report, it says the applicant proposes to remove the existing dwelling but maintain the site-specific zoning criteria as provided by the existing dwelling. It's staff's opinion that the intent of the zoning is not to provide for a new form of development, but rather to respond to the existing conditions, and therefore any change should be evaluated comprehensively. So, Madam Chair, I'm just going to start with the fact that that is not the law of zoning. The zoning is the zoning for this property. The second piece of it is, as you all know very well, the town just went through a comprehensive zoning bylaw review, and in fact, they chose through that process not to apply the zoning to the existing dwelling. And I'm going to just walk you through where the zoning, in fact, does not comply with the existing dwelling. And we've just prepared a chart that talks about the zone requirement, what has in fact been built, and what has in fact been proposed. So the zone requirement, and I'm going to focus on the ones that are quite specific here, but the zone requirement has a minimum front yard setback of 4.13. What in fact is built is a front yard setback of 1.13. So we're looking for a reduction of 0.13 meters from the existing condition. The side yard setbacks as built are 1.16 meters to the building, 0.05 to a screened-in porch for the west side, and 6.05 meters for the east side. The zoning bylaw doesn't capture that. The zoning bylaw requires a 0.9 on the west and a 1.2 on the east, both of which we comply to. Had they wanted to do what staff is indicating is in fact been done, that this is site-specific for this particular building, the new zoning bylaw would have captured the existing site plans. The same for the rear yard. The building is 7.47 meters, a rear yard setback, 4.03 to a screened porch. But the rear yard setback requirement under the zoning bylaw is 3.6 meters. It's not, in fact, shrink wrap to the building that's on the property. So I just wanted to point that out because that's just a factual inaccuracy that is in the staff report that I think is very, very important.
Ms. Baker, you have a minute and a half.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I also want to just talk about the parking variance very, very quickly because I know Mr. Hicks wants to get to the impact questions. But just down the road from this site relatively recently, 2014, was a application where they were seeking the same relief. They were providing the required number of parking spaces, but they couldn't provide the visitor parking because it was all in private garages. In that particular instance, and that's at 7476 Trafalgar, at the corner of Trafalgar and Robinson, staff was of this opinion. The Townsend Zone project, as part of the Townsend Zone project, a number of studies were conducted, including a parking and loading standard study. A new parking standard recommended in 2014-014 are lower than in the old bylaw. The new requirements reflect best and modern transportation planning practices. Bylaw 2014 requires 2 parking spaces per unit, of which 0.25 parking spaces are required as visitor. In this instance, the applicant was providing 6 parking spaces, whereas under the new bylaw, they should be providing 5 plus 1 visitor parking space. Since the applicant is providing the overall number of required parking spaces, the requested reduction of 1 visitor parking space is not expected to provide an adverse negative impact. That is the exact same scenario as in this case, just 1 block west of the subject site. And we submit to you that that is in fact exactly the case here, which is why staff originally told us not to provide that extra parking space. They'd rather see landscape space on the property. So, Madam Chair, we were in fact quite surprised to see staff's comments as it related to not supporting the reduction in visitor parking. I will turn it over to Mr. Hicks now to talk about some of the impact issues.
I will request your indulgence. I know that we're at our time limit. I'll be very quick. I'm not going to talk about the parking again. Denise has covered that very well. I will talk about the rooftop situation. There's a requirement that it be set back a total of about 6 feet from the roof edge. The only piece that we're looking for a variance for is those 2 small pieces. I could, in fact, reduce that piece of the terrace and push it towards the back. In our opinion, and then architecturally, I would suggest that that had a greater impact on the neighborhood. This is a more appropriate approach. This has very little impact on the neighbors. I think planning's raised a concern with the impact onto 340 Robinson Street. The backyard of theirs is essentially parking, and there's 1 small sitting area at the back. So I'll talk very briefly just about the front yard setback, and I'll only show a couple of drawings. The red is the outline of the existing house coming within 1.07 meters. The only piece that we're asking to get closer then, and this line is the line of the required 4.13 meters, which is based on the average of those 2. We're asking for those 2 squares to become closer to the street than what is permitted under the as-of-right zoning bylaw. And as you'll see, the adjacent house, there's a number of them that project within that. But more importantly, I'd like to look at the impact. I mean, we have built a building that is less than the required height. There are 3 pieces of it, or 4 penthouses that match that building height, which are shown here. But that's actually what's permitted by the bylaw at a 4.13 meter setback. When you look at the impact on the street, really the only piece of this building that's any different than what you would see if we built as of right is that 1 small component of the sloped roof at the front of the building. That's the only piece that impacts it. We've done extensive studies with respect to shadowing, and I won't go through and bore you with those. They're all form part of a heritage impact study, which we've always also done. Mr. Temporelli has completed that study and is quite satisfied that it meets the requirements of the heritage impact study. And really what we haven't done is, if you look, just one final item. If you look at as of right, I mean, we obviously looked at a number of different scenarios for this site. We've spent an extensive amount of time with planning. We were somewhat surprised by their final comments. Even the one for parking they had suggested really wasn't a concern because we could add 1 parking space in the back of the property, but we'd rather put the landscaping there for the sake of the residents to the south. But if you look at as of right what's allowed to be built, we could build a full 12-meter high building across the entire frontage of that property with the required side yard setbacks. The only piece, we've elected to not build anything in that zone, but we've elected to trade that and to build those 2 small hatched areas within that. In my opinion, it is far less impact on the street than what the building as of right bylaw would permit on this site. We think it's a sensitive application, and we certainly believe that it meets the intent of the zoning bylaw and the OP, and it's a desirable addition to the character. I know that the residents feel it's too large, too big, too massive. We're not asking for variances for any of those things. So,
Okay.
thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Do you have any questions before we go to the public? If there are any, maybe we could ask them right now of Mr. Hicks and Ms. Baker.
Mr. Hicks,
yes.
A couple of times you've expressed surprise at the reaction of staff. Did you, like, for example, with respect to all this massing and everything that's there, was staff in agreement with everything that you were submitting, and you were surprised by everything that they commented on, or was it just the parking?
No, I think the parking was one specific item. The issue with respect, and I told you I wouldn't talk about rooftop terraces earlier, but the aspect of the setback from the edge of the rooftop was a new section of the bylaw which
Right.
we've never seen before.
Good point.
But parking.
What about the setback from the street? Was that something that initially you felt staff was in agreement with, or?
I can't say that I would say they were fully in agreement with that. They understood what we were trying to do.
Okay.
Asked us to look at different scenarios. We did do that. And as I say, parking, and certainly from Mr. Heck's comment to me, was I'd rather have the landscape, don't worry about the extra parking space. So we can actually comply. I just have to take a garage door off of one of the garages. And then we comply to the parking. Being someone who has his own office on the street with 35 employees in that office, we all remarkably find a place to park, so, as visitors come. So.
All right. And I have one other question which went to your legal point. So you're right, the staff report talks to this thing as and this is going to be some of my ignorance in coming forward with the technicality. They seem to make the argument that the site-specific bylaw existed only for this and that you're trying to amend it. I just want to clarify this. Your stance is that the existing bylaw here could have been amended by bylaw 2014. It wasn't, and it wasn't for a reason, and you are complying with the bylaw as you submit this application.
That's correct, sir. The bylaw could have been what we call shrink wrapped to the building. Had they wanted to take a position that it was only for this building, then we would have had side yard setbacks of 6 meters and rear yard setbacks of 7.57 with permitted encroachments. They chose not to do that. And at the time of the comprehensive zoning bylaw would have been the ideal time to do that. You don't then get to take a piece of zoning for a property and say, well, it only applies to this when it clearly doesn't, and say it was never intended for redevelopment. I think that's not how zoning works. Zoning is not attributable to a particular user per se. It's attributable to a particular use. Townhouse dwellings is one of those uses. 4 units are those uses. And with the required setbacks for those uses. So I just think it's not a fair characterization of the actual situation on the ground.
And when the municipality or in the staff in their report says that this massing is out of character, the size is out of character, both the size, the height, the setbacks, the dimensions, all these comply with the bylaw?
They do, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Baker, Mr. Hicks, I think I heard you both equate the existing house condition to the proposed condition with respect to the front yard setback. But do you have a drawing that would superimpose the existing house on this in terms of its massing and its height, in terms of the elevation?
In terms of the elevation, I have the plan is one that superimposes the house. That's the red line.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I'm
The
hogging the mic.
plan that's before you superimposes all of that red. There's a shed at the back. That red line is the exact footprint of the house. So I don't have, I know that the house that's there is approximately 30 feet high. This plan shows, or this section shows the height of the existing house. Again, we haven't had a surveyor go out and measure that exactly to the inch, but it's just literally across from our office, so I look at it every day. And in terms of a streetscape elevation, we did submit a streetscape elevation, but it does not show the existing house other than that one, which is the adjacent house at 340. But the existing house is similar in scale, but deeper and wider than what's found on that property. So, but essentially sits right in that location through there. So I apologize. I do not have an overlay of the exact elevation of one house to the other. So.
From my recollection of the site, the existing house is not as high and does not have the, what I'm going to call a box-type mass as the proposed.
Absolutely correct. So,
thank you.
But we are permitted the height that we're requiring. So,
I appreciate that there's not a height variance, but right. I'm hearing the rationale being the existing condition and the proposed conditions are very similar, and I have an issue with that. I don't see that at all from.
I don't think I've attempted to say it looks the same. It definitely looks different. It is a larger scale building. I know the residents don't like the look, the feel, the mass, the height, but we're not asking for variances for any of those things. So it definitely looks different than the existing house on the street. So.
Right, and I fully appreciate that what the bylaw permits is very different than what is built there today, and in all likelihood is bylaw permits something that the local residents wish it didn't.
Absolutely.
But my concern is the front yard setback. The height and the mass of the existing building is very dissimilar to the height and the mass of your proposed building, yet both of you in your presentations tried to equate it to you're just trying to replace the existing setback, but with very different buildings.
Just the setback. So I always look at this in terms of is it compatible? Certainly one of the tests. Certainly at the board level is compatible. What does that mean? Well, can it coexist within the neighborhood? I believe it can. The as of right condition, you're absolutely right, would be a far worse condition. It certainly is possible to do on that site. But being on the streets in terms of where I spent half of my life at my own office, I believe that what we've come up with is an appropriate scheme. It does take in that balance, as I've said in this plan. I got rid of the right to build in that piece, and I've shifted it forward for the right to build on that. But I really look at what is the true impact between a building being set back 1 meter and 4 meters from the street, and that one section that I showed you, I believe, recognizes that what you perceive and see from the street has a very small angular plane that has any impact. And in fact, when you look at it from the opposite side of the street, it has absolutely no impact. So I won't find that drawing here again, but there it is right there. So if you place yourself on the other side of the street, what's permitted as of right versus where the existing house is versus what you see here, it doesn't have any impact in terms of its visual impact on the street. So it's compatible. It meets the character of the street. And yes, it's absolutely different than what's there right now. So.
Okay. Mr. Hicks,
Yes.
you'd made a couple of comments with respect to shadow study, and it just kind of twigged when you were talking about the concept of coexisting. That speaks to me about impact.
Yes.
Impact typically in this kind of an environment looks at things like shadow, overlook, character. Overlook and character are a little bit harder to put tangible evaluation on. So can you just spend a little bit of time talking to me about shadow and about staff's review of it, and you spoke of it in the context of the heritage impact. Can you take me through that a little bit?
Yes, I will. So planning puts forth a requirement for doing shadow studies at very specific times of the year. We have performed all of those shadow studies. I won't go through absolutely every one of them. Because of the direction that the building sits, most of the shadows are cast across Robinson Street. There's no impact on the properties to the south. There's very little impact on the properties to the east and west. Will it shadow the backyard of number 340? Absolutely. At certain times of the year it will do that. But we have performed all of those studies. It clearly shows that the shadow impact has nothing to do, or very little, virtually nothing to do with any of the adjacent properties. The main shadows are being cast in that direction. And when you get to here, which is probably the worst case condition, at 4 o'clock on March 21st, then at that point in time, probably the tree that's on this property is casting a larger shadow across the adjacent neighbor's property. But that would be the worst condition. But we have completed and complied with preparing all of those shadow studies. They do form part of our heritage impact study. That was something that Mr. Temporelli looked at very carefully as well. He wanted to be satisfied with that. So we're satisfied that there is no impact. With regards to the overlook piece, again, the balconies on number 3 and 4, and I seem to have misplaced that one drawing. I apologize, but shows right here. These ones have no visual connection to properties to the west, None of them have any visual connections to the property to the south. That was clearly discussed with planning, and it was a requirement that they did not want to have that connection. So it's really just these two that look down into our own driveway and into the back of the property at 340. There's a very large tree that sits basically in there. There's one small landscaped area that's underneath it. But essentially what's behind that building, what you see here, is that's all parking all the way to there. There's that tree. It suggests that there's no impact on privacy for the very small terrace area that is there. And does one have the ability to look horizontally across the town? Absolutely. You're not going to prevent that from any rooftop situation. But we're satisfied that it has no impact, and we've situated, in fact, with the discussions with planning, we've taken all the balconies off of the back of the building. We've taken the balconies off the side of the building. We only have balconies that look into our own property. So.
Just to follow up, in terms of your comments in the shadow, has staff completed a review of it, and does it conform to the tangible measures of Oakville's shadow studies?
I can't answer that on behalf of planning. I don't know that they have reviewed it because we were asked to go through this process before we went through the site plan committee process. So I know from my many presentations at the board and presenting this type of evidence, it certainly complies to what I would suggest has no impact.
That wasn't specifically my question, but
Sorry.
thank you.
Yeah.
I do have one last question for you, Mr. Hicks.
Yes.
If you had to push the building back from the front, I noticed that in the back you have a line of trees in the back of your new development. So technically, you could do that. You could push the building back, but it would destroy, well, it would take away that landscaping and perhaps move that landscaping to the front.
My
Any thoughts
submission.
about that? Like, is that perhaps not good design?
That's an option. I would suggest to you that's not good design. I'm suggesting that planning and the residents that live to the south of that would be quite vociferous about that suggestion.
They might be. Yeah. Looks like some of them are already there.
I think we originally had a building that was set back slightly further. We came back because of the transition rules and everything else. We said, no, we will meet the rear yard setback, so we've reduced the width and size of the unit. So it would be a poor design decision, in my opinion. So.
And if I could just add to that, sorry, across Robinson Street, of course, is the CBD designation, which for any building, townhouses which are across the street, while legal, no new townhouses are allowed to be built in the CBD designation. So anything that would be built on the north side of Robinson Street would be a building and would be at a zero front yard setback. So the impact, it would be a better situation to have a closer design to the street than to the residential properties to the south, because this property actually provides as a transition from the 4-story CBD to the 2-story low-density residential. So the south side of Robinson Street is designed for that. And so having it, the majority of the building to the front, where across the street could potentially be a zero building, would be a better option even under the zoning bylaw.
Questions of Ms. Baker or Mr. Hicks? Okay, thank you. Okay, we will now allow the members in the audience to speak. Who would like to come first? Okay. Mr. Ramsey?
Correct.
You had submitted something to us. Is this concerning the same?
Yes, I've
Okay.
provided you with 2 submissions. I provided you a detailed submission, which was published in the reports that you received, as well as I provided a 1-page or 2-page summary of my speaking notes tonight. Just as a quick aside, it was nice to hear Ms. Baker give her professional opinion on planning matters. when she was talking about setbacks and so on, because I'm used to getting all types of legal questions from her, but I'm glad that she's ventured into the planning world. You've got my detailed comments, and first off, I'm here on behalf of the Oakville Lakeside Residents Association, and my detailed comments go through, and I think in a comprehensive manner, the applicable context of the site, the official plan policies, the zoning provisions, as well as how, in my opinion, these matters don't meet the four tests of the Act. And I should say that my comments were written at a time when there were no drawings available for the rooftop terraces. In fact, I don't believe you have drawings for the rooftop terraces besides what was given you tonight. And when I did my comments, it was on the premise of the notes that were, or the how the variance number 3 was described in at the September 27th meeting, which was to permit something that was prohibited. And then subsequently that was revised when the rooftop terraces provisions in the zoning bylaw under 466C were checked out. So I just want to say that this particular location, it's characterized, in my opinion, the south side of Robinson Street currently, today, is predominantly single detached dwellings, or at least single detached dwellings in form. The one exception, of course, is the existing property that has a single detached dwelling form, a house form, but does accommodate 4 units. This area is also adjacent to, or in very close proximity to, 2 heritage districts, the Old Oakville Heritage District, which abuts these lands on the south, and the 1st and 2nd Street Heritage Districts, which are on the east side of Allen Street, as well as there are 4 designated heritage properties in the immediate vicinity. There's 3 on Allen, and there's 1 at the corner of Robinson and Reynolds. When you look at what the zoning bylaw permits on the adjacent lands, the lands on the south side of Robinson Street, with the exception of this site, are all zoned to permit single detached dwellings. There are lands that are zoned RL6, RL5, so between the heritage designation and the existing zoning, which permits single detached dwelling, it's my respectful opinion that the character of the area is typically just can be seen as lower density, lower scale, not with the massing that you see in this proposal. These lands are also part of the stable residential area within the town's official plan. So there's policies that deal with those matters, or that they deal with several matters about compatibility that need to be considered when you as a committee are considering requests for variances. It's my opinion that the variances will facilitate a development that is not in character with the neighborhood. The 4 units that are being proposed will have an area, a GFA essentially, when we add it all up, of about 13,000 square feet, which is about 4 times what's on the site today, and also about 7 to 8 times, or 5 or 6 to 7 times as much as what you typically find in the adjacent buildings. The exception, of course, are the lands on the north side of Robinson Street, which are designated as part of the central business district, and they're subject to a whole bunch of different rules about what can happen there. But what is there directly across the street is a set of street townhouses, 5 units, 3 stories in height, that have driveways and are set back 6 meters or so from the street edge.
Mr. Ramsey, can I just interrupt you because your whole focus seems to be on the massing, and I don't think that's what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the three variances and how they apply.
Right.
And also with respect to those townhomes across the street, I think I just heard that if they were to be built today, they could never be built with driveways anyway. They would have to be built right to the edge of the street.
Right.
So I'm just, if you can just focus in a little bit on with respect to the setback, I get it that the residents are probably going to be upset about the massing, but you as the planner in front of me, I just want to hear your arguments with respect to these variances.
Right. Well, sir, with greatest respect, the variances facilitate an increase in massing. So, for example, if you were to accommodate, and there's different ways of doing it, but if you were to accommodate one visitor parking that wasn't in somebody's garage, which doesn't seem very practical or functional, but if you provided one space on site and you reduce the front setback from 1 meter to what the bylaw permits, which is 4.13 meters, you're going to get a change in massing. Right. And you will change the streetscape. There's a whole bunch of things about character and massing that you will change with a reduction or with the adherence to the requirements of the bylaw. So it does, my comments do talk about massing, but massing is a result of the variances. And if you don't have the variances, there is a reduction. There's certainly going to be development on the site, and it's going to be large, but it's going to be reduced and mitigated if you adhere to the requirements of the bylaw. And certainly using a legal non-conforming front setback as a basis for the continued operation, or to rely on a legal non-conforming front setback of 1.13 meters, when the building that is at the street edge in that location is a 1.5-story dwelling with an A-frame at the front. So with a gable end, it's 1.5 stories. The 2-story portion of the existing dwelling is set back. So what you have on the street is not a three-story solid wall right at the street edge, essentially, with actually a 4th-story penthouse or mechanical penthouse that's right at the street edge as well. So that's
Mr. Ramsey, your time is up, and we do have 2 other speakers from the public that would like to speak, so I'd like you to wrap it up within the next 30 seconds.
Okay. The rooftop terraces will continue to have privacy issues with respect to the use of the property at 340 Robertson Street. The request for a reduction in visitor parking to 0 is not appropriate. And in fact, what's going to happen on the site is the on-street parking that's in front of the property will have to be altered, and likely 1 or 2 spots will be lost, which compounds the problem. And then finally, with respect to the 4 tests, my detailed brief goes through quite comprehensively as to why I believe, from a planning point of view, this application does not meet the 4 tests.
Thank you, Mr. Ramsey. Are there any questions before we invite the next speaker? No, I see none. Thank you. Sir, you may proceed.
Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Mike Russell, and I live at 70 Allen Street. And as Mr. Hicks suggested, in March 21st, we'll be totally in darkness, according to what I see. I don't think that shadowing happens exactly on that date for that period of time. It's obviously a phasing in of that. I'd like to speak about this. The extraordinary scale and mass of this development as designed is a combination of the variances requested regarding setbacks and the elimination of guest parking. but it also compounds a poor zoning decision to allow the sale of the backyard of 340 Robinson in the late 60s, something that would not be allowed today. This has resulted in a building which will be nearly 11 meters high and 1.2 meters off our back fence, while we have a rear yard setback of 7.5 meters. This is a heritage area with severe restrictions on our architecture. Impacted are several small houses on small lots on the east side that were deemed so significant to the town that they were moved and saved from demolition in the 1920s. Now this developer wishes to build a massive structure over 13,000 square feet, looming directly off our back fences. This will block our sun and impinge on our privacy. It will certainly not be a transition to medium density, but instead will be an abrupt barrier, disrespecting the vision of a historical area and be an imposition on the neighbors. Side yard setbacks allow structures to be built more closely to each other, and usually houses are designed with no or small windows on the side. The rear yard setbacks generally are greater in order to ensure privacy for themselves and their neighbors. In this case, the rear of one of the townhouses, Unit 4, has 6 large windows, and that will use the 1.2 meter side yard setback as their rear yard setback, and will disrespect the eastern neighbor's rear yard setbacks. So this really isn't a side yard setback, it's a rear yard setback to us. The building size impact of allowing the variances is approximately 700 square feet. And while not only adding to the mass of the building, it results in some $600,000 value to the developer at today's luxury square foot costs. The maximizing for size for maximum profit by a developer who will sell these units and move on is detrimental to the uniqueness and the heritage of our neighborhood. I would be pleased to answer any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions of Mr. Russell before he leaves? No, I see none. Thank you. And our final speaker? Is this our final speaker? Or there's one more after Mr. Ramsey? Okay.
My name is David Ingalls, and I live at 339 Robinson Street, across the street from this new development. The reason I wanted to speak was most of my neighbors have looked at this development, and as you heard, we're always talking about the massing, how big this building is, not really in keeping with the neighborhood. So I went and tried to get some information and managed to get it off myproperty.ca, which gives information on the size of different properties. You'll see that in that block between Robinson and Williams and Reynolds and Allen, there are 13 properties, of which 4 are heritage buildings. On average, the size of each building is about 2,000 square feet, and the property size is about 44,000 square feet. What we're looking at here is this new condo is going to be 13,127 square feet on the same size lot that they had before. So it is 3.1 times the size of the present building. Now, as has been mentioned, there are several townhouse developments in the area, including the one I live in across the street. That townhouse development there is 5 units. We have 10,314 square feet of building on 7,170 square feet, 3 stories. So the ratio between the building in square feet and the lot size is 1.44. Next door, across the parking lot, right on the corner of Allen and Robinson, there is a townhouse complex of 8 units. They are looking at 17,193 square feet of building on 10,824 square feet of lot. So their building ratio is 1.59. Further down Robinson, between Reynolds and Trafalgar, we have 2 sets of townhouses, each with only 4. They're very small townhouses, averaging about 1,600 square foot per, and actually the ratio of the building size to the lot size is well below 1. What we're looking at 332, 338 Robinson is 13,127 square feet on 5,227 square feet of land, and the ratio becomes 2.51. Now, if we use the same kind of ratios as the nearby townhouses, ones right across the street, where instead of building a building for 13,127 square feet, it probably should be something like 7,500 square feet. If it was the higher ratio of 1.59, it probably should be 8,313 square feet. So when the local neighbors say that the building is too massive, I don't think we're exaggerating. Instead of 13,000 square feet, it should be a lot less. And I think for Rockcliffe to go ahead and build these units, they really need to have a choice of 4 units at about 2,000 square feet, which is what most of these townhouses are in the area, or 3 units of 2,500 square feet per unit. The other thing is on the very top, we have these mechanical penthouses. This is probably to house the elevators, I would think, probably not for air conditioning because that can be built on the ground outside. I think they need to look seriously at removing or downsizing those penthouses because I think they could be looking at some other kind of elevator system, probably a pneumatic one, and nothing would have to be built up on the roof. I also think they could be looking at some other way for having their people that move into those townhouses be able to access the rooftop gardens. I think the rooftop gardens could be very attractive, but I think those penthouse roofs are certainly not. And at the bottom, I've mentioned some of the livable Oakville general policies. It says new development should ensure that proposed building heights and form are compatible with existing development. And I submit that what is being proposed does not meet that criteria. I think if you stand on Robinson and look at the present buildings right now, you look down, you can see a nice straight line. This building, if it's only 1 meter from the front, is going to be much further forward. Right now, there's a wall that's only about 5 or 6 feet high that's 1 meter back, but the actual building itself is, I'm sure, at least 4 meters back. So that's my presentation. If there's any questions, I'd be pleased to answer.
Sorry, my mic was not off. Are there any questions? No. Thank you, sir. We appreciate your submission. Final speaker. Your name and address for the record, please.
My name's David Cape. I'm the co-owner of 75 Reynolds, which is on the east end of Robinson at Reynolds. We've heard some very good arguments from an architect eager to get on with a project. I'd just like to explain a couple of things that I had to go through, or my wife and I had to do with respect to extensive renovation that took place at our place at 75 Reynolds. First of all, we worked with an architect that encouraged us to consult with neighboring properties. We were new to the area, and we did that. Most of them are here. All supported our efforts, all had their comments. We talked it through. And our application and experience with the Heritage group was actually very smooth. We found them having explained what we were up to. We did have some issues, but we were able to get through them. What strikes me as being quite obvious as a bystander listening to the presentations on both sides tonight that clearly there has been very little consultative process with the developer, with the neighboring properties. That's a huge concern to me, having spent the time and effort and to listen to constructive arguments about architectural design, flavor of the neighborhood, all these sort of things that we listen to, and listen to with the intent of maintaining what we were felt and were encouraged to maintain in the neighborhood. I take a look at this project. I'm in commercial real estate myself for 30 years. This project clearly is not consistent with the look or the feel of the neighborhood. I think that's very important to understand. I see an opportunity through an existing bylaw, I guess the way it's been referred to, and I can see Mr. Hicks taking full advantage of a bylaw that I think, frankly, if it were put in the rightful context, he'd have to build 4 units in that one house. Essentially, I see an opportunistic situation which I think should be taken into consideration in this by the committee. It's extremely unfair to one particular neighbor who will now have 5 front doors or 4 front doors sitting in their face. This is not the case with any of their neighbors. I also encourage the fact that concur with the observation that 2 houses had been removed or have been placed as heritage properties on Allen. Ours is, I don't believe it's designated, but we rolled with the concept and have done the same thing. The neighborhood will be impacted very negatively with this particular design because it'll set precedent for the rest of the south side of Robinson. And notwithstanding the quote, the existing zoning, I think it's pretty clear that there's a developer that is willing to take advantage of a loophole with zero consultation with the neighborhood, and they're not getting any support. It strikes me as being quite unjust. I actually read the design guidelines for stable residential communities put forward by the town of Oakville, which I totally concur with. I think it's an excellent document, very sensitive to this kind of situation. I think it's an ideal document to apply in this particular situation. We care very much for our neighborhood, and we are not anti-development. There's lots of examples of responsible development in the area, and I think that's really what we're all asking for, and I would encourage the committee to consider that, notwithstanding legal or justifications with respect to, I think, a bylaw that was envisioned to apply to one house. In this case, they want to tear the house down, and in that case, that should bring up an entire new discussion as to how many units are actually allowed in that site. In closing, I'd just like to say I'm very impressed with my neighborhood in terms of the way they put this together. We're new, but I'm very concerned for the development that's going through here, and I encourage the committee to not pass this application. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Cave. Right on the mark of time. I did ask ahead of time if you were well represented, and I thought we were.
Good evening.
Okay, name and address for the record, please.
My name is Andrew Coase. I'm at 333 William Street, which is immediately behind the subject property. I did want to react or respond to a comment from Mr. Charlebois about the front setback and the ability to push it further back. The property is already overreaching all its boundaries. It's at its maximum setbacks, if that's the correct planning term. So living on the south side, I hope everybody appreciates that Robinson Street is higher than William Street, and the land continues to slope down through the Heritage District and to the lake. So the proposed development already looms above us like some evil castle out of the Game of Thrones. And to move it further back by some variation is not a solution. The property is, as we've emphasized, a massive structure and should be contained within the regulatory boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Are there any questions? Okay. Who is going to respond on the applicant's behalf? Mr. Hicks? Okay. There you have a handful of things to respond to. And
I would like to respond to each of the four speakers. I will be brief, though. I know
Okay.
it's getting late in the evening. So,
thank you, Mr. Hicks.
Mr. Ramsey, first speaker, expressed concerns with, and I think the question was raised that there was not really any discussion of what is the impact of these variances that we're asking
Right.
for. I stand by that position, that I don't believe there are any impact. He said it was out of character with the neighborhood. I don't know, because I drive down that street every day, but I don't think you can define the character of the neighborhood and the character of the architecture by only looking at one side of the street. So you have to look at both sides of the street. The variances we're asking for do not affect the character. I think Mr. Ramsey described that the variances facilitated an increase in the massing. The change in parking has absolutely no impact on the massing. If we add an additional space, it doesn't change the building. We could actually build a building that's much bigger than what we're seeing. The rooftop terraces have no impact on massing. We are screening them appropriately from 340. And the setback in my presentation to you, I don't believe has any impact on massing by moving the building back from 1 meter to 4 meters on the street. Yes, it is closer than what is permitted, but it does not have any visual impact on the street, and that's my perception of that. So there was a discussion, and certainly there's a question when I was speaking before of what's the nature of the existing house. That's from the Heritage Impact Study that Mr. Temporelli has done. It was described by Mr. Ramsey as a 1.5-story house. It's clearly a 2.5-story house, not a 1.5-story house. So I just want to make sure that we're aware of that. And the rooftop terraces, again, as I say, I don't believe impact on the privacy of the building at 340, and they certainly don't impact on the privacy of any of the other adjacent neighbors. Mr. Russell talked about overshadowing. There were only 2 drawings.
Can I interrupt you, Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
I just need to clarify a couple of points, because there's a lot of things floating around here.
Yes.
That visitor parking spot, at one time I believe you said you could build it, but you chose not to build it because you wanted to put more landscaping. Is that a true statement? Like, you can put a visitor parking spot on there?
I'll show you that
legally?
because I don't know if I can find that drawing, so my apologies. So, yeah, I've got it here. So, our discussions with planning were that we could take a garage door off there and provide it in there, which doesn't make any sense in terms of the person who owns that unit. But it is possible to put a parking space at the back of there, which is fully accessible. It's hidden from the street. Our position on that was it would impact some landscapability at the back of the property. We can still introduce a fence and introduce appropriate landscaping. But as I said, the planning, not the director, but certainly the manager of that area, suggested that it wasn't necessary to do and just proceed with it the way it is, because you actually meet the parking requirement on the site. So
But you could legally do that.
we could legally do that as
Okay.
far as I'm aware. So.
Okay, and then my last question, and it goes to this resident's last one. Can you legally move the building, not that I want you to, so let's be clear on that one, but I just want to know from a legal perspective, can you legally move the building back from Robinson? That full distance between the 1 meters and the 4 meters, so that 3 meter difference that you have in Robinson, could you legally move the whole building back and put it closer to the buildings on Williamson? Please, I'm not advocating that you
No.
do it, I just want to know if you can.
We would not meet the required rear yard setback, which is noted there. So
Okay, so you're at the rear
we
yard
are
setback
at the
now.
rear yard setback. We used to be reduced from that, and in planning consultation, we
Okay, thank you.
improved that situation. So.
Thanks.
Again, on the Mr. Russell's comments, saying amassing is larger, I didn't hear any impact again of any discussion of what the true impact of that is. Again, we've looked at the shadow studies. There were certainly a discussion from Mr. Russell when I showed the shadow studies that on September in the afternoon and on the worst-case scenario, March 21st in the afternoon, there is some shadowing on that property. That's not to be unexpected with any building that's found in downtown Oakville, so, or even with the houses of adjacent neighbors, or impacted by existing trees, et cetera. So, there was a lot of discussion about the size of the building. If you look at the actual as of right bylaw, I could build 25,000 square feet on the site, so we're not suggesting that. Is it bigger than? We've heard a lot of discussion about the FSI, or the floor space index, in terms of what constitutes the character of the street. My position, I believe, on that is that this is still appropriate. We haven't built it to the maximum width. We haven't built it to the maximum height. We're not seeking coverage requirements. And in fact, the town of Oakville had the opportunity in their new zoning bylaw, which they just passed, to change that on this site. They deemed not to do that. So in my opinion, the zoning bylaw is deemed to conform totally to the OP, simply by the fact that council has just approved a new zoning bylaw, and it has to conform to the OP. So we are not we're not looking for loopholes in the bylaw. We're not trying to take advantage of neighbors. I'm presented by clients who are trying to seek to accomplish certain things on properties. My goal is to find the best way of accomplishing what they have as of right to do, and I believe that we have found that. Yes, it's bigger, and yes, it looks different, but will it be compatible with the neighborhood? I believe it will be. But if one's sitting behind it and looking at it, yes, it is higher than what one might find on the site, but it's lower than what the bylaw allows. So it's actually substantially lower than what the bylaw.
What is that bylaw, just for my edification?
It's 12 meters of height. So.
And you're at what now?
We're at 10 meters for the roof, and just the penthouse pieces go up to the 12 meters. So.
And you would be permitted to build 12 meters of building and put the penthouse on top? Is that what you're saying?
No, the penthouse pieces, and I'll show you that on the...
Or are you saying with the penthouses, you meet the height bylaw?
With the penthouses, we're still within the 12 meters, so nothing projects above that.
Right.
But the penthouses are only that piece, that piece, that piece.
I know, but you said you could go higher. I guess you could build around the penthouses, is what you're saying.
The roof line of the house, the
Yeah.
roof line as it faces the
Is the
street,
penthouses.
can be higher. So.
Okay.
I think with that, members of the committee, I think covers most of what I've heard. I didn't hear a lot of discussion of what the true impact is. I'm not denying that it is different. I do feel as an architect that it is in character with the neighborhood, and it's certainly compatible and can coexist within the neighborhood. I don't believe there's any impact on privacy. Yes, there are windows overlooking properties, but one finds that in absolutely every property that's built in the town of Oakville. So you can't have no windows. If I had no windows on the side of the property, I'd be listening to the residents have a different discussion with me in terms of what happened to the side of the building. Why does it look so ugly? Because there's no windows in it. So planning has those discussions. As I say, we've had a very long consultative process, and someone had made the comment, I think the last speaker had said there hasn't been an appropriate consultative process undertaken. We have met with the Lakeside Residents Association. We've had many meetings with the planning department with respect to this. So we do feel that we've maintained our obligation to have those discussions. So, and as I said, we went a long way where we thought that planning was hopefully going to come back in support of this, and it turns out they didn't at the end, but so that was somewhat of a surprise to us. But notwithstanding that, we still feel very strongly that this does meet all the 4 tests, and it is an appropriate application of the bylaw. So, thank you.
I've got one last question for you,
Yes.
Mr. Hicks. If you did push the building back to the 4 meters, I guess technically you could build 4 units of 4 stories. Is that what you're kind of alluding to me when you said that you've got room? You could take the suggestion that one of the residents have and change the way the elevator works and maybe even create a 4-story. That's possible under the bylaw?
No, the bylaw, I think one provision of it, if I'm correct, has to be townhouse.
Townhouse.
Development.
And 4 stories would not constitute a townhouse?
Having a separate unit on top of the other units would not constitute a
Not a
townhouse.
separate, just a 4-story townhouse.
Yes, you could do,
Yeah.
actually,
No?
3-story is the provision.
Is the max,
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
Again.
And
just
12 meters.
Technical questions, but thanks.
Are there any further questions? I see none. Are we prepared to take this matter into committee? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hicks. We will.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members.
Is anyone prepared to move a motion and then start the discussion rolling?
You know, I have one last question, if you don't mind, of planning.
Ms. Mihailovich, you're on.
There was an argument put forward by the applicant directed at your comment that it is staff's opinion that the intent of the zoning is not to provide for a new form of development, but rather respond to the existing conditions. And that's a big basis of what your argument is. Having heard everything in here, are you changing your opinion? Are you still stand by this?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, the opinion is not changed because the nature of the application is to respond to the test of the intent of the zoning bylaw in this matter. And historically, as we've provided in our comments in the paragraph above the second paragraph that Ms. Baker has provided, provides a historical reference as to how the zoning on the property actually came to be, which was to reflect the building as it exists today. So the setbacks that the applicant is using with respect to the 3.7 meters in the rear, the reduced side yard setbacks, those are specific to the regulations provided in the site-specific zoning that dates back to 1968 to reflect the existing conditions. The variances that the applicant is requesting of you this evening reflect the new zoning bylaw. So staff did incorporate the existing bylaw requirements in the new bylaw by bringing forward the site-specific regulations. That was the shrink wrapping that has been referred to as before. The bylaw is being requested a variance under the current regulations of 2014-14. You'll notice in the notice that it references the parking as provided in section 5. That's part of the parent bylaw. That's not part of the site-specific regulation. The minimum front yard is also section 6 as part of the parent bylaw, not the site-specific regulation. And then with respect to the terraces, which we all know is a newer component as part of this bylaw. The test here is the intent of the bylaw to provide those specific regulations. And in this instance, it's our submission that the intent of the bylaw is to provide for a more uniform setback where new development is proposed. The applicant is requesting to maintain the existing setback of the existing building, which doesn't reflect those types of conditions and therefore doesn't meet the intent of the bylaw. And those are our submissions that we've provided in our comments.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. No. We're done. We're in committee.
You're not going to allow us to reply to a new question? Because the information you're getting is incorrect.
Why don't I ask you, why is that information incorrect?
Thank you, Mr. Charlevoix. I appreciate the opportunity to respond to that. Oh, sorry, Mr. Hicks. So Ms. Mihailovich is indicating that we are responding to the 2014 bylaw when we're talking about this. And I just want to be very clear about this because, thank you. She's not correct. As an example, and let's just take the most obvious of the east side yard, sorry, I'm just going to look here. Thank you. Of the east side yard setback. The existing building is 6 meters side yard setback. The zoning provision that they say shrink wraps that requires a 1.2 meter bylaw. That's their zoning bylaw. So if they wanted to say this is shrink wrap to that building, that side yard setback would be 6 meters. And the survey is here to show it, that it's 6 meters. And to turn around and then say, no, it's shrink wrap to that building is just factually inaccurate, sir. And you should not be accepting that.
Thank you.
Okay. Someone move a motion and then we can discuss.
Madam Chair, this is a complicated one. I mean, we're we begin with two arguments from both respected parties as to what the intent of the bylaw is. And I have to admit that this kind of stuff is a little bit beyond me. But I can see that there are some differences of opinion. Taking into account what everybody has said, you know, it's clear to me, or it seems to be clear to me, and this is where I got to be careful because we have some differences in perhaps the interpretation, that this type of a building is permitted, the height is permitted, the way it's oriented is permitted, and some of the arguments that are brought forward from the various residents, there's nothing here for me to comment on because it's permitted. But the one thing I am going to say is, I don't think you could build this building if we didn't grant you the right to move the building further forward onto the street. And so I'm going to put forward a motion to deny that. I'm prepared to accept variance number 1 with respect to the visitor parking space. I'm saying no to variance number 2. And I'm going to say, I don't know about variance number 3. I just can't feel that there's just not enough information here, so I'm going to say no. So I'm going to find that this doesn't meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and I'm going to make a recommendation that it be denied.
Sorry, Mr. Shalba, I just want to clarify for the record. You are denying the application on
I'm accepting variance number 1 and denying it on variance number 2 and variance number 3.
Okay. You got that? Okay, let's have a discussion on this recommendation, and that is to accept variance 1 and deny the rest of them. Mr. Talowski, you have a comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'll start with requesting a friendly amendment. I'm not sure how we could justify accepting variance 1 if we're looking at a redesign, if the others are being denied. If the committee were to vote that way, in a redesign, there may well be an opportunity to provide that visitor parking space. I have no doubt the neighborhood will not be happy with whatever gets built on this property. The bylaw clearly allows, well, the bylaw clearly allows a building that's out of character with the block in which it resides. If I take Mr. Hicks' view, which is also a valid one, if you look at it in the context of Robinson Street, it's probably not out of character. But I heard the applicant say staff wanted to change the bylaw. They had the opportunity to change the bylaw. They have a brand new bylaw. The converse to that is if staff wanted a 1 meter front yard setback, they would have changed the bylaw and called for a 1 meter front yard setback. They chose a calculation to look at compatibility. The rooftop, I would say, is a technical variance. The parking, in terms of numbers, probably clearly minor. Is it appropriate to have no visitor parking? That's another issue. But I just cannot see how it's desirable or meets the intent of the bylaw to go from the 4 meters to which is trying to establish some form of uniformity, to 1 meter and putting it well in front of the buildings around it. And I'm always cognizant on issues like this to make sure that sometimes we can deny a variance and the community ends up with something that's worse. So when I hear comments like we're not even going to the maximum height, I always try to take that into consideration, but I don't think that holds true in this case, that the building's going to get higher because, as we heard, it's limited to 3-story townhouses. So to go to the maximum 12 meters would just be adding more ceiling height for the sake of maximizing the bylaw, and I don't think anybody's going to do that. So I have no doubt the building that's not in keeping with what's around it can be built here, but to facilitate the increase in the massing by allowing the front yard setback, that's something I cannot support, and by not supporting that, I feel the whole building would have to get redesigned, so I couldn't support any of the variances.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tlowski. So you will not be supporting the application or the recommendation to accept variance 1 and deny variance 2 and 3. Mr. Hardcastle, would you like to say something?
Not to belabor, I think that the previous comments provided by my colleagues do well to summarize. I too would be concerned with leaving the parking variance out there without a proposal to go along with it. So I would support such a friendly amendment as well. And I too feel that the requested variances are, particularly the front yard enables a massing of the building that is greater than what is in existence in the neighborhood, brings it up right at the street edge, and I believe that it is undesirable development. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Now, it's up to you, Mr. Charlebois. You can either accept the amendment and deny the application as a whole, or elect to have us vote as per your recommendation to accept 1 and deny 2 and 3. So it's your call. How would you like to present your recommendation so that we can vote?
Madam Chair, I'm prepared to accept the amendment. I mean, I was really just trying to deal with each one, but as my colleague did mention, a redesign of this thing could actually end up facilitating that. So I will accept the amendment and reword my motion to deny all 3 variances.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois. So the motion is to deny the application on all 3 variances. All those in support? Okay. Sorry, your application has been refused.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Ladies and gentlemen, I do request that we, if you are going to leave this room, that you do so in an orderly fashion. And speaking out in this committee at this time is just not acceptable. I appreciate you being here and I appreciate your time. Thank you if you are leaving us. Okay, we will now call back to the podium application CAV 143-2012 at 3358 Lakeshore Road West.
Madam Chair, I'm back.
Mr. Cheeseman, I have a couple of comments and then we'll try and proceed from there.
Okay.
So it has come to my attention that the owner of this application has spoken to the Secretary Treasurer on the phone, and she did advise him that he should request a deferral and submit the changes accordingly to allow for the procedure to be followed. Now, I know that there was another case here today that allowed us to make changes on the floor, but that was at the discretion of staff.
And ma'am, I just want to point out a couple of things. Firstly, when Mr. Riley attended at the Committee of Adjustment Offices to amend the notice,
right,
he was told he would that could be done and that we would have the opportunity to walk the drawings on. That's the reason I'm here tonight. If I hadn't been, I would have been at the ball game because I had tickets that I gave up for. So I would have been here.
Okay, I believe that the Secretary Treasurer has something to say to that effect.
And secondly, if I may just may add, in terms of, I went back and sat down and had a thought about the notice tonight. You indicated to me when I started that variances 6, 7, and 8 were to be removed.
Correct, because that's the changes that the bylaw amendments have taken toll on your application.
But, ma'am, if you remove 6, 7, and 8, I can't get a building permit because I still need the bylaw 1964.
No, not anymore.
It's under appeal.
Hold on.
I
Miss-
have it under appeal.
Ms. Mihalovic, would you like to answer that?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. Mr. Cheeseman is not incorrect. He has an active appeal on his application. So while the rest of the zoning bylaw is in full force and effect, Mr. Cheeseman, for his client, does have an appeal on the property. So these variances should not be removed from the application until that appeal has been addressed.
Okay, so that's the
They would
Secretary
stand.
Treasurer's mistake then?
Well, no,
Or do we
I
have
think
to-
it's, through you, Madam Chairman, I think it's just an oversight with respect to our zoning services department. We had requested that they go through the application specifically and address which applications would be affected by the change. I think on this matter, it's an oversight because there is still an active appeal on this property. And as such, because the appeal is still active, the new zoning bylaw has not fully taken effect on this particular property.
So are we dealing with the application as it stands right now from 1 to 8?
Madam Chair, it would be my suggestion that that is the appropriate course of action. The only harm, should there be any in this instance, is that they're redundant. That by the time the applicant were to proceed with the building permit, that those variances are in fact redundant because the bylaw is no longer applicable.
Okay, and the Secretary Treasurer has a question.
Yes, because the last minute where I came here, I got from the zoning bylaw officer reviewed and removed. Actually, I have to show these removed variances on their request. So this is my instruction for this application, but because probably they were not aware of the.
So is that an
of the-
oversight on
yeah.
the zoning bylaws and that they weren't aware that there was an appeal on this?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I would suggest that there was in fact an oversight in this instance. Again, this was very last minute that we had requested zoning staff to do this, and as the Secretary Treasurer's indicated, she got the comments by like 5 o'clock this evening. So it was quite a tight timeline for them to review it, and quite likely was not the appropriate zoning examiner in reviewing this particular file to understand the history on this particular property.
Okay, thank you. Now, I don't want to digress, but there are two issues, okay? You're talking about changes to your application. I'm simply talking about process and following the process, okay? So my comments to you today are, I don't appreciate being strong-armed into a deferral, because the statement that was made to the Secretary Treasurer was, have them defer it, that way we don't have to pay the fee. Now, if you had intended to make changes to your application,
Yes?
and you did need a deferral so that the submissions can be circulated accordingly to the public, as well as staff, as well as the members, then that should have been done when your client was advised to do so. And
But ma'am, we did attend at the Committee of Adjustment offices to amend the notice, to make sure that the notice numbers were changed, and we were told at that point in time, I mean, I wasn't there, Mr. Riley was there, was told that we'd have the opportunity to walk, over the phone, that
Was over the
we walked it, otherwise I would have
But
requested
even
for, I wouldn't have shown
even
up.
the amendments were not as such. For example, the application that came before us today that was changed on the floor, okay? Yes, the committee members were not thrilled with the idea, but staff had ample opportunity to review the application and give us their comments and walk us through that. Now, if staff is willing to give you the same courtesy, then fine. But the way I see it, you only have two choices. Either we are prepared to hear the application without amendments or changes as they are submitted, and before me, one of them is not. So it would be 1 and 2 as per your request, and then 3 stays the same at 29.55.
But if I advise the committee.
Or you may choose, okay, for a one-time courtesy to request a deferral, and the committee will have to vote on that request.
To defer.
Yes, but it has to come from you, and you will pay the fee, and we have to vote on it.
Ma'am, I'm here this evening, Mr. Riley's here this evening. My client has spent a lot of money to have us here this evening.
And certainly, this is not a
So in
matter of an
terms-
$800 fee, for example.
Well, exactly. So I'm
So then
struggling,
why
I'm
wasn't it
struggling to
done
understand
properly?
why I'm being chastised.
No, I'm
for-
asking simply, why hasn't it been done properly?
Ma'am, I thought I would not be here if I didn't think we were doing it properly, ma'am.
Okay, Ms. Mihalovic, do you have any comments? And I believe the Secretary Treasurer has comments on that effect as well.
Through you, Madam Chair, just for the record, staff are not prepared to evaluate the application tonight on the floor. As it's indicated in our comments, this is part of a site plan application that has undergone an extensive amount of review, and it would be remiss of me to provide any such comments without consulting with urban design staff, as well as the planner on the site plan file in terms of the appropriateness of the variances, albeit reduced, with respect to the application. So again, I'll repeat, staff are not prepared to provide you with any advice on the revised notice as submitted in the absence of having reviewed the revised drawings.
And ma'am, if that is the case, then I would respectfully request a deferral to allow planning staff to take the time that they see necessary to look at the revised numbers and provide a comment back to this committee and to us.
Through you, Madam.
That's what we're about.
Through you, Madam Chair, with all due respect to Mr. Cheeseman, an application, a resubmission is required to the Planning Department in order to review the application. It is not an assessment of numbers alone. Please resubmit plans to the Planning Department for them to do their review.
We will gladly do that, ma'am.
Okay, Secretary Treasurer, you had a comment to put on record.
Yes, I do have a comment because this submission of the application, so we actually sent a couple emails to the agent, applicant, and owner, everybody, that basically we don't have a time to review the notice because we don't have a drawings. They wanted to submit drawings after our circulation, which is not, is it agreeable? Yeah, it was like that. So we told them to not submit us because we don't have time, and we told them to defer the application, which they didn't want. They said they want to proceed with the no drawings because we can accept the drawings after the circulation of the notice. This is how it works, everything. So we had to accept the numbers without any review of the drawings. Nobody reviewed, even the zoning officer, not the planning staff, conservation, everybody were calling and asked for the drawings because they haven't been provided. Based on everything we said, we are not responsible for the drawings reviewing because we didn't receive on the time. We gave them proper time since Friday to review the notice and send me comments. Even on Monday, which is the last day to review the notice, was not received. And late afternoon, they request to bring the drawings after the circulation. So this is the from our office, how was the whole process was done. And we had the meeting, we accept the application, we accept actually notice, but with no responsibility of any numbers.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. Secretary Treasurer. So the request before us right now is a request for deferral to allow the applicant for resubmission. Any discussion? Recommendation or request? Mr. Hardcastle.
I'd just like to make one comment that I find myself in a deficit position in front of the proponent and everybody else to try to render a decision on an application when I haven't been provided with the drawings in advance of the meeting. I like to have the drawings to attend the site and to do a fulsome review and to be able to probe the commentary that's provided by staff. And so I'm just kind of putting that out there for future such situations, for example. And I would support the motion in this specific circumstance. I don't feel that I've had enough opportunity to review this and render a decision on the matter.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Any further comments? Mr. Charlebois?
I actually sympathize with your position here on this. The only thing I'll say is that the other application that came forward to us, staff, although we heard about it afterwards, they said it was their mistake, but But in the meantime, they supported it. The problem you have here is staff is not supporting it. And you're just in a, you know, I think you're heading in the right direction, as I told you before, but I think you're in a tenuous situation if you come forward and staff doesn't support it and you're trying to get something here. I think it'd be fair, totally different if staff wasn't support. So I'm actually in agreement with you that your best course for you and your client in this house is to defer and work your best to get staff on side.
Prabha, I'm going to have to tend to disagree with you on this statement. In the last time we heard the applicant's application, staff was not in support either, but they followed the due process and submitted everything in order for us to be able to look at it ahead of time so we can formulate our own decisions. In this case, that was not, done.
I apologize. It wasn't their last application. I was referring to the one earlier this
Yeah.
evening that staff was in support of, so it was a little bit easier for us to digest it. In this case, staff has said to us that they will not review this and they will not comment on it. So we sit here with a bit of a blank as to what this new drawing should be. It's just too hard to evaluate.
And ma'am, it may have just been a complete misunderstanding, but if someone had said to me, there's no way to walk a drawing onto the floor of the Committee of Adjustment because we don't allow that, that would have been the end of it. I showed up here tonight, we brought copies because that's what we intended to do.
Sir, you can walk a drawing. It happens. But usually what happens is you've met with planning's in support of it, and you walk the drawing and everybody says sorry, but in the spirit of things, let's get this thing going. In this case, you don't have that part of the equation here.
I
think it puts you at a disadvantage so.
Ms. Mihalovic.
Madam Chairman, to the committee, I would just like to reiterate that the reason that we're here this evening is because the motions had failed on the previous attempt. There was a split vote because not all 5 members were present that evening. And since that, the motion to defer until such time as all of the appropriate members were present to make a decision, the application has changed. So we're treating this deferral as if it were a brand new application, rather than to follow up from the previous decision made by this committee, which was to wait until you had a proper vote. So,
But to be fair, there was a large discussion at the last month's hearing, and we heard certain members of this committee loud and clear. And the idea was you were going to go away and amend it if you can. And that's what we've done.
But we're in a situation where, even though the decision is in our wheelhouse, and we could, if we wanted to, take a look at these drawings and look through them and spend time. It's past 10 o'clock. It's past our, I forgot to actually make a motion to extend until 10:30 because we have gone over our time limit. Motion, Mr. Charlebois, okay. All those in support? Okay, so let me get my train of thought back. So in that sense, we could have done that, right? But staff not being able to review whatever decision we make also can be appealed, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to have that situation where there is no real understanding of the application and the reasons behind the decisions that are made for it. So that's my opinion.
But ma'am, I would come forward, we're going to present the evidence of Mr. Riley as the planning evidence to give you, because you are the decision makers who make the decision. And you're right, anybody can appeal a decision of the Committee of Adjustment, but I mean, I'm here because I'm trying to move the thing forward as best I can, because as I explained last time, I have an appeal of bylaw 2014-14 that's now scheduled. It has a date set. Trying to make sure that we resolve this in this form rather than having to deal with it in the other form. That's what this is all about.
Okay, Mr. Cheeseman, we'll take this matter into committee and vote on the deferral that you've requested. And you've heard all the comments, they're all on record. Moving forward, we should keep everything straightforward and follow the due process in order to speed things along and for the application to be heard and voted on. All those in support of the deferral? Thank you. Now, Secretary Treasurer, when is the next available application that we can bring them in?
The next available date is November 29th.
Do we have a meeting before the 29th?
Yes, it's full, it's already been scheduled, the whole.
All of it,
All
okay.
of it.
So there's no way to squeeze them into
No,
that one?
No.
Okay. So the only date that we have before us is the 29th of
If-
November?
If everything is, so 14 copies of the drawings, CD, deferral fee, everything has to be in order to be circulated again.
So as you heard, the planning department, they are looking for a brand-new application with all the requirements to be submitted. So it's not just the drawings and that's it.
It won't be a brand-new application, it'll be the same application. New drawing,
Submission, I meant
new
to say submission, I
Right.
apologize. What I meant to say was submission. Okay? Good. So it's been deferred to the November 29th. Thank you. We have minutes to confirm for September the 13th and the 27th. Sorry? Okay. Minutes of the 13th and the 27th.
I put forward a motion to adopt the minutes of the 13th and the 27th.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Charbla. Motion to approve those minutes. All those in support? Okay. Motion to adjourn, ladies and gentlemen.
I put forward a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Charbla. Motion to adjourn. All those in support? We are adjourned at 10 after 10.